to dwell.
This is the largest union talk radio program in the southern United States. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. We'll go ahead and open the phones now. It's 844-899-8857. Lot to talk about, though. Appreciate everybody already jumping in the chat. We've got Bingo Bango 89. Yo, what up? Quirky Geek Girl says good morning. Mark says good morning. Appreciate everybody for hanging out with us. And looking forward to the program. We do have a lot to talk about. We're going to go ahead and jump right into it. The U.S. Senate has blocked an effort to extend the ACA subsidies for 3 years. The Republicans, by and large, voted against the measure. There were 3 that voted in favor of it. I believe it was Murkowski, Hawley, and one other. I can't recall. I think the other senator from Alaska. And this is going to have huge effects on working people, not just working people in the marketplace. Alabama Arise has a great page up about what is at stake for just the state of Alabama. And of course, this is, these numbers are similar, but much more across the country. Here in Alabama, nearly 500,000 Alabamians are enrolled in marketplace coverage as of May 2025, and 98% of those enrollees use the premium tax credits to help afford their monthly premiums. The average marketplace premium in Alabama will increase by 93%. Because of that huge increase in price, 130,000 Alabamians will likely drop out of the marketplace altogether if and now when the enhanced subsidies expire. When 130,000 Alabamians drop out of the marketplace, that is going to create increased costs on everybody else. Because if we don't have, because the 130,000 Alabamians who are most likely to drop out of the marketplace are the ones who are most likely to be younger, healthier, and need less care, right? So it's the people who it just makes the least amount of sense for them to personally invest in health insurance. So when those people drop out of the marketplace, that means the people that are left are more likely to be using their health insurance and more likely to need it, and thus the costs are going to increase for everybody. Really concerning. This loss of health coverage will cost Alabama in 1 year $1.14 billion in economic activity and 10,000 jobs. Just some anecdotal examples of what people across the state can expect to experience. Households earning as little as $15,000 per year for an individual could be priced out of coverage altogether. A 60-year-old Alabama couple making $82,000 will see their annual premiums for a benchmark plan increase from $7,000 a year to more than $27,000 a year. Small business owners and self-employed Alabamians receive their health coverage through the marketplace, and so they're going to be very hard hit as well. And not only did Republicans block this plan, the subsidies from continuing, they have no plan to address the insane state of healthcare in the country right now. They have no plan. Actually, they do have a plan. The plan that they proposed was to have a one-time direct deposit of $1,500 into health savings accounts for some Americans. That was their big proposal, to replace these enhanced subsidies that make health insurance affordable for so many working Alabamians. A one-time direct deposit of $1,500 in health savings accounts. I mean, just insulting. a slap in the face to people who work hard and need health care. But the reason that Republicans have no answer to Obamacare is because Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, is fundamentally a conservative, market-based solution to healthcare in this country. And I would argue that's why it sucks. That's why it's terrible and it's not good. Is because it's a conservative solution. Jake, why do you say it's a conservative solution? The Democrats are the ones that proposed it. The Democrats proposed it after the Heritage Foundation in the 1990s drafted a proposal, because in the 1990s, when Bill Clinton was president, Hillary Clinton was pushing a single-payer health care proposal. She was trying to get single-payer health care because health care was, at that point, also a big issue. And so her proposal was single-payer. So the Republicans had to have something else. And obviously, because Republicans are ideologues, and they can't just look at whether something is something effective or is it not. They have to say it must be small government, quote unquote. It must be market-based. And so they came up with this whole idea to set up a marketplace that the government sets up, but that private insurance companies are able to directly sell plans to individual people, blah, blah. So that was their answer. Literally, the Heritage Foundation, the authors of Project 2025, are the people who created this market-based solution to the healthcare problem in the United States. The first implementation of an ACA-like marketplace was in Massachusetts under Republican Governor Mitt Romney. And so, by the time we get to Obama winning and needing a healthcare solution, because he was so interested in trying to make things bipartisan, and he wants to do, you know, he wanted to do a bipartisan thing, and he wants to be seen as reasonable. He said, well, I'll just do the Republican thing. I'll just do the thing that Republicans have been arguing for the last 15 years. And of course, then because it was a Democrat that was proposing it, Republicans then opposed it. But now that Democrats have adopted the Republican solution to health care, Republicans have no solution. There's nothing, they have nothing to offer. And so that's why they have these weak proposals like a one-time direct deposit of $1,500 into a health savings account. It's totally, it completely does not meet the moment. It is not a solution for healthcare in this country. And the real solution, obviously, is Medicare for all, is single-payer healthcare. Everybody is excited when they turn 65 to be able to get on Medicare. You don't have to worry about as much, picking your plans or whatever, or premiums are lower. It's a load off. I mean, for one thing, it's just a load off. Every year you have to pick your health insurance plans and you have to say, oh, is it going to increase or is it going to not? What is it going to cover this year? What is it going to not? Blah, blah, blah. It's just a hassle. It is just a hassle. And so the obvious solution is single-payer healthcare. I mean, you look at other countries, Canada, for instance, they cover all of their healthcare for all of their citizens for like $11,000 or $12,000 per person per year. I am on the marketplace right now, and next year, if I stay on the marketplace for an entire year, and I stick with the plan that I have this year, and I get no health care. If I pay my premiums all year and I don't need any health care, right? So I don't go for an annual checkup and I don't pay a copay. I don't get in a wreck and have to have surgery. I don't have, if I get no health care, I will have spent individually out of my own pocket $16,000. That's crazy. $16,000 if I get no health care next year. People in Canada, the whole country, $11,000 or $12,000 per person per year, and they can go and they get as much health care as they need. It's obviously a much more rational system. The government can then negotiate with the drug companies, bring the drug prices down. They can negotiate with the hospital, bring prices down. It's much more, it's rational. It's more rational than having all of these private insurers, everybody negotiating, everybody spending time negotiating individual deals between insurance companies and hospitals. And then on top of that, you've got to have the shareholder tax, the profit tax that you got to pay to the executives of Blue Cross Blue Shield, of United Healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. Wouldn't have to do that if it was a Medicare for all system. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I've gotten on a rant, but Republicans just obviously not meeting the moment. We've got one more story here really quickly before we get to our guest. Looking forward to this conversation. But the U.S. House of Representatives passed last week the Protect America's Workforce Act. This was I was surprised that it passed by the margins that it did. The Protect America's Workforce Act is a direct rebuke of Donald Trump's anti-federal worker executive orders. Back in April, and then in subsequent executive orders after that, he revoked collective bargaining rights for almost 1 million federal workers across the country, citing, quote unquote, national security as the reason that, nurses can't have a union because it would threaten national security. Obviously very silly. So the Protect America's Workforce Act just straightforwardly rescinds those executive order and gives back collective bargaining rights to most federal employees. And so that is huge. And it passed the U.S. House of Representatives 231 to 195. That number includes 20 Republicans voting in favor of this direct rebuke of Donald Trump's anti-union executive orders. So the vote comes after a majority of the House representatives signed a discharge petition. That is the same maneuver that was used to force a vote on the Epstein files. So, I mean, that is a really, really impressive feat, I think, getting so many Republicans to directly support federal workers and directly rebuke Trump's treatment of federal workers. The legislation will almost certainly die in the Senate, but even if it doesn't die in the Senate, if it gets somehow the 60 vote threshold in the Senate, obviously not going to be signed by Trump, which is what, which is very frustrating. The National Defense Authorization Act, which also passed last week and is, will soon be signed by Donald Trump. That at one time included the Norcross Amendment, which would have done basically the Protect America's Workforce Act for Department of Defense employees. And that would have been, that would have been a really, really good thing. But that provision of the NDAA came out, even though it passed in the House version of the NDAA, it came out in conference after the Senate version came back. It ended up taking it out. And so that provision that would give collective bargaining rights back to Department of Defense employees was taken out of the NDAA that was ultimately passed and sent to President Trump's desk. So we will see. We'll see what happens with the Protect America's Workforce Act. Obviously, we're going to be following that very closely. We're going to be talking to Chris Dols in the second half of the program. He's the executive director of the Federal Unionists Network, a new federal worker organization that has sprung up in the last couple of years and has been very, very, very influential in fighting for federal workers. So we're going to be talking to him about what he thinks about the passage of the Protect America's Workforce Act from the U.S. House of Representatives. Adam, I don't know if you had anything else to add to that.
Well, yeah, I was just going to say that I think it's worth noting, as the AFL-CIO did in their statement, that Americans trust unions more than either political party. So it's going to be interesting. I think you're right that we have a lot of reasons to be pessimistic in the Senate, as well as obviously with the White House. But hopefully more and more politicians can see which way the wind is blowing and see that, when 70% or so of Americans stand with labor, that's a pretty big majority. That's certainly more popular than either party. It's more popular than the institutions in DC. So I believe that the American people are behind us. I don't think they want to see these public servants have their rights stripped. I mean, we all want to have rights on the job. We all want to have a voice on the job. I think, we all want to have a collective bargaining agreement. These are very reasonable, modest ask, I think. And, it's been unprecedented, this attack on labor members just in this past year. So I'm glad to see it. We'll see what happens with it. But yeah, I just wanted to remind folks that, the American people are by and large behind the labor movement.
Yep. We have on the line Randy Hadley, the Mid-South Council president for the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, also recently elected first executive vice president for the International Union. Brother Randy, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. Thanks for joining us today.
Good to be here. Good to be here. So,
really excited to have you on because RWDSU has won multiple organizing victories just in Alabama over the last couple of years. Can you talk to us about winning those union elections?
Yeah, in the past few years, we've concentrated on healthcare. We're getting a lot of phone calls from a lot of the CNAs and the LPNs throughout the state of not only Alabama, but all over the Southeast United States. And we've got organizing campaigns going on everywhere. We've recently won, and this year we've won 3 that we've won, already negotiated 2 contracts that have ratified by the membership that had substantial wage increases and job protection. One thing that we find out when we do go to the shops, when people call us about organizing a union, is the fear of losing their job. Number one, they're protected under federal law. But number 2, I always tell people this: without change, nothing changes. And the only way you're going to make change is to get together and have a voice. And I've been in the labor movement and working with the labor movement now for 43 years. And I've seen a lot of changes in the last 10 years. The RWDSU Midsouth Council, we represent 28 nursing homes throughout the state of Alabama. And we have about 10 of them over in Mississippi. We got them down in the Florida Panhandle. And one thing that our people and our members recognize is when they've got the union, they've got protection. They've got people they got somebody that will be there that's going to be on their side when they're called into that office by that administrator. Because if you don't have a union and you're called into management, you have nobody on your side. With a union, you've got somebody that'll be there to protect you and speak up for you.
That's always what I try to emphasize to folks. When like you said, when there are a lot of people that would love to form a union right now. I mean, unions have an insanely high approval rating. It's something like 75% of Americans approve of unions. Something like 60% of working Americans said that if they could, they would vote yes in a union election tomorrow. But saying those things and actually being on an organizing committee and trying to build a union in your workplace are definitely two different things. And they're two different things because when you actually try to do that in the real world, you are confronted with the fear of losing your job, the fear of your employer. And, like you said, if you're in a non-union workplace, you have to you have those dangers all the time. You can be fired for any reason or no reason at all if you don't have a union. The only way to change that, the only way to actually protect yourself is to unionize. And I think that's really important. You said that you're representing workers at 28 nursing homes and rehabilitation centers across the state of Alabama. What were the most recent places that you've organized?
The most recent place was in Pell City, Alabama. It's owned by Diversity Care, and we've already negotiated a contract and ratified it, as I was saying earlier, where they got their pay raises and their job protection. Listen, I tell people this all the time. If you have a union in your shop, the main reason you need a union is to have a voice and to redress issues. It's not all about benefits and wages. It's about having a voice and having someone in there on your side. Because with a union, you're going to have a grievance procedure. Guaranteed that. And that grievance procedure gives you a right to have someone like me, to have someone that's sitting on our team that's going to be representing you. And 9 times out of 10, we will have an attorney there that will be sitting there that understands your problems about you. And that's what these administrators and these DONs at these nursing homes, they don't like it when somebody comes in there and says, hey, no, you can't do that. You know, I remember a few years ago when COVID started, one of the first things, the very first day we were in these shops, we were in these nursing homes hollering and screaming about protection for our nurses, for our LPNs, for our CNAs, for our housekeepers and everybody. Tragically to say, we lost 2 of our members that worked in our nursing homes from COVID. But we've also, in our union contract, we've negotiated language in there. If COVID comes back, if we get a large outbreak in it, the rules and the do's and the don'ts that the employers can do, and the rates of pay, we make them pay them more, even more money per hour. You know, our average pay starting in our nursing homes starting out is somewhere around, and it's still too low, but it's around $15 an hour. You know, and based on your experience, you can go up anywhere from $25 to $28 an hour with benefits, with union benefits. And that's one thing that we're proud of. So, you know, we hear about nursing homes aren't making any money. You hear this from the government and everything. Last year alone, the nursing home industry profited $11 billion. $11 billion. So there's money out there.
Yeah, sounds like there's money that sounds like some of that money could be going to the workers for sure. You know, we're in Alabama, and I know that, you know, the nursing population is obviously a little bit different demographically than maybe some other groups of workers. But being in Alabama, it's a very conservative state, and there's a lot of and, you know, so a lot of particularly political people, anytime there's a union campaign, they try to say you shouldn't unionize because you're a conservative. You shouldn't unionize, you know, because you vote Republican. But obviously, you and I, being union members in Alabama, we know lots of union members who are conservative and who vote Republican, and they're just as much members of the union as everybody else. Has that been a difficulty that you've had to overcome in the nursing homes as you're trying to organize and build strong contract campaigns, or you know, are among nurses is the political question of unions not as much at issue?
Well, let's talk about the political issue. There's one thing about the retail wholesale department store union is we represent and we vote for people, and we get people elected that take care of people. Just because you got a Democrat in front of your name, that doesn't guarantee you a vote from the RWDSU Midsouth Council. Yep. We support just as many Republicans as we do Democrats. And the reason we do that is we look at how you vote. You know, that's one thing people need to watch, is how their representative votes on issues and stuff. But I want to say this one thing, and it's going on in a lot of our nursing homes that the union watches, is patient ratio. We go into these non-union shops, and believe it or not, some of these CNAs and nurses, they are responsible to watch after as many as 30 people per shift, 30 residents per shift.
Wow.
The union, we fuss and scream and holler every day to the state of Alabama representatives that we want the number to be somewhere around 13 residents that they're responsible for. Can you imagine trying to take care of 30 people per shift? Now, that's giving them their medicine, that's taking care of them, that's watching them. It just is, it can't happen, you know. And one thing 30, that we're proud of.
30 people is like that's on the larger end of a classroom size. And, having 30 kids running around is that, that can be difficult. But having 30, just speaking frankly, dying people that you have to watch, that sounds much more difficult to me than a classroom size of 30 people. And the idea that in non-union nursing homes, one person could be responsible for 30 really, really sick individuals, that would scare me. If I was a person that was sending a loved one into a nursing home, that would scare me a lot.
And it should. We put bills together as we speak to try to get them passed in the state of Alabama that would require that they only be allowed to service. And when I say service, I'm talking about taking care of them. No more than 15 per shift. And that's still a high number. But one thing that we've noticed in our nursing homes is we don't have anybody coming in applying for these jobs anymore. And the reason being is exactly what I'm saying. Number one, the pay is not what it should be. It's got to get higher. The benefit package has got to get better. You go out to California and stuff where the nurses are making and the CNAs are making anywhere from $40 to $50 an hour, and then you come over here to Alabama and they're wanting to start them out at we've got a shop we just went to the other day down in South Alabama that a CNA they're wanting to start them out at $12 an hour. That's to take care of someone like our family member, like my mother ended up in a nursing home. I want somebody that's going to be qualified. Not that you're qualified if you make not going to be qualified if you make $12, but I want somebody that's going to stay there and is going to continue to work there for years to watch after my mother and me too, because I'm getting old.
Well, Brother Hadley, we've talked about a bunch of organizing victories that y'all have had. You've organized a couple of new nursing homes in the last couple of years. You've won contracts there already. Are there any contract campaigns or organizing drives that we should be keeping an eye on in 2026 in your union or even outside of your union?
Well, we're getting phone calls. We're getting a lot of phone calls from warehouses, from retail stores. We're looking to expand in the retail industry and the nursing industry. But we haven't given up on Amazon. We had a strong campaign with Amazon a few years ago, and they've had us tied up in court, but we're not going to walk away from it. But I encourage people, if you're tired and you want changes, reach out. You can reach out to the RWDSU. You can reach out to us at 1-800-292-4906 and just leave a voicemail. We'll call you. We'll be there and walk with you in every day. We won't go away. I promise you we won't go away. And listen, if without change, nothing's going to change. So we got to stick together and change this.
Brother Randy Hadley, I appreciate that. Can you give us that number one more time?
That's 1-800-292-4906. Or you can call me directly at 256-683-7339, and I'll be more than happy to meet with you.
All right. We've been talking to Randy Hadley, the president of RWDSU's Midsouth Council and recently elected first executive vice president of the International Union. Brother Hadley, thank you so much for your time.
Have a good day. Merry Christmas and happy holidays, everybody.
Yes, sir. Yes, this is actually going to be our last live program. We're going to have some pre-tapes and best ofs for the rest of the year. We'll be talking about that more later on in the program. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We're going to be taking a break momentarily, and we will be right back with Beau Hawk, business representative for the Knoxville, Tennessee Building and Construction Trades Council, about trying to get a project labor agreement at a nuclear construction project in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Really excited for that conversation. Stay tuned. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Tennessee to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. Today on the program, we just had a conversation with Randy Hadley, president of the RWDSU Midsouth Council, about their recent organizing victories, and talked about the ACA subsidies. If you did not see that, you can find the stream, Facebook and YouTube, at the Valley Labor Report. We're soon going to be talking to Beau Hawk about their fight for a project labor agreement in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show, we've got a phone number and the line is open. You can give us a call at 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave a voicemail throughout the week, and we might respond to it on the next program. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, tvlr.fm. But we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program, or just make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. We've also got a bunch of cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. And finally, if you're a member of a union, then think about getting your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that.
Hey, y'all. Let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We want to welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, Means TV, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. And as most of you know, we are not media professionals, just some diehard union brothers who want to amplify the voices of the working class in the American South. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we cannot do it without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener. We appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Let's get to last week in Southern labor. Here's what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to from December 5th to December 12th. In new union campaigns, 155 workers at ATI Specialty Alloys and Components in Huntsville, Alabama, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Steelworkers, USW. 39 workers at Charter Communications in Florence, Kentucky, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW Local 369. 57 workers at Pepsi in Lithonia, Georgia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters. 9 workers at Build-A-Bear at Union Station in St. Louis, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, Local 655. 3 workers at Amberwood Estates Nursing and Rehabilitation in St. Louis, Missouri, filed a petition to hold a union election with an unnamed union. 42 workers at Pepsi in Atlanta filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters Local 528. Workers likely pushed by their employer filed a petition to decertify UFCW Local 28D, which currently represents 43 workers at Heaven Hill Distillery in Bardstown, Kentucky. 10 security guards at Allied Universal Security Services in Washington, D.C. filed a petition to hold a union election with Union Rights for Security Officers, URSO. 73 workers at Norfolk Botanical Garden in Norfolk, Virginia, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Association of Machinists, IAM. Workers likely pushed by their employer or other business interests and helped by a local attorney who defends corporations against discrimination cases at Volkswagen in Chattanooga, Tennessee, have launched a decertification petition to decertify the United Auto Workers, UAW, as the union representing the thousands of workers there. All the news coverage about the decertification petition says, quote, a few dozen employees are behind the effort and have only quoted 2 supporting it at all. This comes just after a supermajority at the plant authorized a strike, so I'm skeptical that there is enough to decertify the UAW there. In election results, Union Rights for Security officers withdrew their petition to raid a unit of 11 security guards at KR Contracting in Washington, D.C., currently represented by the Security Police and Fire Professionals of America, SPFPA. 5 workers at RATP Dev USA in Asheville, North Carolina, voted 4-1 in favor of unionization with the Amalgamated Transit Union, ATU, Local 128. 25 workers at Starbucks in West Palm Beach, Florida, voted 15-10 in favor of unionization with Starbucks Workers United, as did 21 workers at a location in Bowling Green, Kentucky, voting 13-5, and 16 workers at a location in Paducah, Kentucky, who voted 12-4. 8 workers at IMI Tennessee in Cookeville, Tennessee, withdrew their petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters, Local 519. 5 workers at Hillside Rehabilitation and Care Center in St. Louis, Missouri, withdrew their petition to hold a union election with SEIU Healthcare, Missouri, Kansas. 183 workers at Southern Glazers Wine and Spirits across 5 locations in Louisiana unionized with the Teamsters, Local 270 and 568 through card check. Workers at 68 locations have now organized with the Teamsters. 100 bus drivers at First Student in Missouri voted in favor of unionization with the Teamsters, Local 838, and 700 nurses at St. Joseph's Hospital in Bryan College Station, Texas, voted in favor of unionization with the National Nurses United. 165 workers at Microsoft video game subsidiary ID Software in Richardson, Texas, unionized with the Communication Workers of America, CWA, Local 6215, through a card check procedure. The CWA describes the unit as wall-to-wall. In grievances, unfair labor practices, and court cases, Dr. Tom Alter, a former Texas state professor with tenure who was fired for his speech at an online socialism conference, continues to fight to get his job back. He was recently interviewed on local news in Austin. The U.S. Supreme Court refused to hear NLRB versus SpaceX, leaving in place a circuit split on the NLRB, and the Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruling, which declares the NLRB unconstitutional and therefore unable to resolve disputes, remains in effect in its jurisdiction, the states of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas. IFPTE Local 777 has launched a petition to have the Federal Labor Relations Authority amend its regulations to make it easier for federal workers to remedy problems as they arise in the workplace. In strikes and bargaining updates, 200 food service workers at George Bush International Airport in Houston, Texas, unionized with Unite Here Local 23, ratified a new 3-year collective bargaining agreement. The union says workers will receive an immediate $4 an hour raise, bringing the wage floor for most workers to $20 an hour, with an additional $2 an hour in raises over the next 2 years. Spirit Aerosystems, which had been spun off from Boeing years ago, has been reacquired by Boeing. Members of the Machinists Union at Spirit Aerosystems in Kansas told local news they are optimistic about the takeover. 136 workers at Real Alloy in Morgantown, Kentucky, unionized with the Teamsters, Local 89, ratified their first collective bargaining agreement. The union says that the contract locks in strong annual raises, better retirement benefits, Teamsters health care, and more paid time off. In political and legislative updates, analysts are raising the alarm about the impact on the Alabama education budget of the recent legislation that siphons money from public schools to private schools in the state. The anti-worker freaks at the Alabama Policy Institute say it's not a big deal, though, and that the legislature should just increase education worker health care costs by, I kid you not, 5 to 25 times and cut the state's retirement contributions for education workers by 65%, and that'll take care of the problem. No big deal. Donald Trump signed a new executive order purporting to override state laws regulating AI, directing his attorney general to sue states that have AI regulations, and withholding broadband funds from states that have AI regulation. As he signed the executive order, he was flocked by tech billionaires who increasingly seem to be running the administration. The measure is obviously not without its critics. Republicans in Congress balked when a similar provision was snuck into the so-called Big Beautiful powerful bill and threatened to kill the whole legislative package if it was not removed, so it was. It's worth noting that the center of the Teamsters legislative agenda has been anti-automation legislation, including being supportive of California legislation that will likely be targeted by this executive order. Will this be the beginning of O'Brien's breakup with Trump? For its part, the AFL-CIO said in a statement that unregulated AI would further empower corporations to spy on us, steal our jobs and data, and even decide what medical care we get, and pointed out that 80% of Americans want AI safety rules in place, yet Trump would rather reward the tech CEOs who are making billions off the back of working people. The U.S. House passed the Protect America's Workforce Act to rescind Trump's executive orders revoking collective bargaining rights for federal workers by a vote of 235 to 195. That includes 20 Republicans voting in favor of this straightforward rebuke of Trump. The vote comes after a majority of House representatives signed a discharge petition to force the vote. The same maneuver was used to force a vote on releasing the Epstein files earlier. It is an impressive feat to get so many Republicans in the House to so straightforwardly rebuke Trump, but the legislation will almost certainly die in the Senate, and even if it doesn't, it will not be signed by Trump. The Washington Post's editorial board, owned by Jeff Bezos, it's worth pointing out, wrote an insane op-ed where they argued against the U.S. House passage of the Protect America's Workforce Act. While recognizing that Trump's national security justifications were nonsense, the editorial board said that instead of rebuking his executive order, Congress should instead, quote, affirm Trump's decision to strip collective bargaining rights while dispensing with his flimsy national security justification. While using corporate anti-union language like, quote, labor union bosses, unquote, to describe elected leaders of federal workers, citing anecdotes of poor performance and peddling fears of strikes as reasons for ending unions at, for example, the VA. U.S. Senator Richard Blumenthal and Representative Nikki Budzinski wrote a letter to the editor defending federal workers and noted that, quote, the unionized VA workforce has consistently been an essential steward for patient safety and a voice against the executive branch's potential despotism. The National Defense Authorization Act, which combined with other defense spending allocates $1 trillion to defense, passed both houses of Congress and now heads to the president's desk for signature. Unfortunately, there was an opportunity to include much of the effects of the Protect America's Workforce Act in that legislation, and the U.S. House actually did include those provisions in its original version, but they came out during the conference with the Senate version. The NDAA gives the military more money than Trump asked for. Senate Republicans blocked an effort to extend ACA subsidies, meaning they are all but certain to expire. The proposal to deal with skyrocketing health care costs was a one-time direct deposit of $1,500 into a health savings account. If we missed anything, let us know at tvlr.fm/contact, and it might be included in next week's roundup. And subscribe to the newsletter at tvlr.fm to get the exhaustive version of Last Week in Southern Labor. I believe we have our guest on the line now. Beau Hawk is the business representative for the Knoxville, Tennessee Building and Construction Trades Council, also president of the Knoxville Oak Ridge Central Labor Council, the AFL-CIO body in the region. Beau, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Thanks for having me.
Really excited to talk to you about this. We've got a couple of things that we wanted to talk to you about, and the first is about trying to get a project labor agreement with Kairos on a nuclear project in Oak Ridge. You're working on this in your capacity as business representative for the Knoxville Building and Construction Trades Council, and the reason that this came to my attention is that union members were conducting informational picketing at the Oak Ridge Turnpike the other day. Can you tell our audience why?
Yeah, so we're doing an informational picket, the local building trades affiliates of the Knoxville Building and Construction Trades Council, to get the word out to the community and also to kind of put a call out to Kairos Power, which is building the Hermes reactor project in Oak Ridge. That we wanted to come back to the table after, failing to reach a project labor agreement to govern the construction of that project.
And so, what has labor's relationship been with Kairos in the past and more recently?
Yeah, so Kairos and the general contractor for the project, Menard Construction, they are employing, I think, 3 of our union crafts right now on the project. We have had meetings in the past. President Charlie Woody of the Knoxville Building Trades met with them, helped along by the meeting was facilitated by Oak Ridge Mayor Gooch, and they were, able to have some conversations and everything, and kind of it led to some of our affiliates being able to work on this project, but they did refuse to bargain or to sign an existing project labor agreement for it. So we would like to, we are optimistic for the possibility of partnership with Kairos, and we have had one subsequent meeting with them during the while this picket has been going on in Oak Ridge, but at this time we haven't had any progress on negotiating anything.
And so, we've talked about on this program project labor agreements before. You know what they are, I know what they are, but a lot of people in the audience may not be familiar with a project labor agreement. Can you give us kind of what is a project labor agreement or a PLA?
Right. Yeah. So, I'm sure some of your audience is probably familiar with collective bargaining agreements that, where it's essentially just an agreement between one union and one employer. A project labor agreement is a pre-hire agreement that covers all the crafts on a large, complex construction project. It establishes the terms and conditions of employment. It's basically, rather than what a CBA, collective bargaining agreement, your standard kind of practice, it's a mutual agreement between whatever entity is controlling the contracting for one of these big construction projects and a coalition, collective of unions for the duration of that project's construction. So in this case, it would be the Knoxville Building Trades would be the bargaining agent for all of the workers on the site, made up of all of the individual building trades affiliates, and really it's very beneficial for workers and the community as far as local hire and getting better jobs and training opportunities to the building trades apprenticeships in the community. But it also really assists these companies, and this is really borne out by the really large, considerable network of existing partnerships that we as the building trades have with contractors in Oak Ridge, where there's a lot more efficiency and ability to kind of deploy these large-scale projects on time and under budget.
Opponents of project labor agreements, including those, a lot of non-union contractors and the associated builders and contractors, will say that project labor agreements are bad. They say they undermine competition. They say they increase costs, et cetera, et cetera. Why are they wrong?
Yeah, I would definitely recommend checking out research done by the National Alliance for Fair Contracting on this subject. I think they've done a lot of really good work on demonstrating that it actually reduces cost in many cases for these companies to use project labor agreements. And could you repeat the first part of that question, please?
Yeah, the opponents will say they increase costs and they undermine competition.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So, that's kind of a really common misconception, but there really isn't anything about a PLA that restricts non-union, non-signatory contractors from competitive bids. That is something that we deal with all the time, where somebody that's non-union will come in and they will come in under one of these major project labor agreements that we already have in Oak Ridge, and they will just become signatory and basically are able to tap into the workforce that we already have available in the area and make sure that they have a steady supply of manpower for the project.
Right. The way that, tell me if my kind of conception of this is wrong, because I'm not in the building trade, so I'm not as familiar with it. But the way that I conceptualize of it is it's like setting a floor, and that floor is the union standard, for wages, safety, and training. But like you said, it doesn't prohibit non-union contractors from just on that project meeting that floor and coming up and saying, you know, okay, well, we're going to pay our workers this much. We're going to make sure our workers are this trained to be on this project and be able to compete to work on a PLA project. But, you know, the reason that they don't want to do that is because, you know, if they give their workers a taste of maybe the union standard, then they might have, they might have a union on their hands for the rest of their projects later on down the road, and they don't like having to pay those wages and adhere to the rigor of union standards in building and construction. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And, I think especially in the context of Oak Ridge, when there's so many opportunities on these PLAs that we already have, that there's going to be, as this workforce demand for nuclear development ramps up in Oak Ridge, I think that's going to be more of a challenge for anybody who, like Kairos, is trying to avoid, using that workforce, using those labor standards that are set by these PLAs. I think that's definitely an accurate assessment of how that's kind of borne out.
I've mentioned some of those studies in the past before that have shown that PLA projects can decrease costs over the term of a project, and the mechanism by which that happens is fairly intuitive. If you've got a project labor agreement on a project that is setting higher wages, higher safety standards, higher training standards, then it's intuitive that you would get less accidents, less rework, less time lost to injuries or bad work on the job. And so, then you have less delays, and because the budget is already at a decent level, you're less likely to go over budget. Now, and you don't have to co-sign this necessarily, but I will say that there are, the ABC, the non-union contractors, they've got their own studies or whatever that show that PLAs do actually increase costs. I'm not sure exactly what the truth of the matter is there, but I would just say that even if PLAs do increase costs by 5 to 10% over the course of a project, then it's worth it to have people on construction projects being paid good union wages, having health care, having a pension, having strong safety standards. I mean, union construction sites have something like 30 to 50% fewer fatalities. I mean, that in and of itself is worth a 5% increase on the price tag. And just to make sure everybody's clear, that is disputed. Is there a 5% increase on the price tag? The unions say no, the non-union contractors say yes. Whatever the answer is, I think it's worth it, just for fewer deaths on construction sites. And so, I think all around the PLAs, they, like you said, they increase local hiring. And so all around, I think even if that's disputed, but even if there is a higher price for PLA project, I think it's worth it. The TVA, you said that you're trying to get the PLA on the Hermes reactor project for Kairos. Kairos is partnering on this project with the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority, and Google. And both of those entities have been open to working with the building trades, with Google in particular actually partnering with the IBEW specifically to try to help train 100,000 electricians over, I think, the next 5 years. And so with those two as Kairos's principal partners on the project, why hasn't Kairos agreed to a PLA yet?
I think that's a great question. Obviously the TVA, the building trades, we have a long-standing partnership with TVA, and a master agreement going back to, I think, 1991 PLA with them. And that power purchase agreement that TVA signed with Kairos, where they're going to give them up to 50 megawatts into the TVA grid to power Google data centers in Tennessee and Alabama. I would love for, in the future, for these kind of situations, it would be great if, more standards would be built into those agreements on the PPA end, the power purchase agreement, just so that we can kind of have a little bit better footing for accomplishing these kind of agreements. But yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I'm not sure the answer, but I think it will, it's one of a list of kind of points of leverage that we do have there. And I think ultimately, kind of going back to, it connects with the previous kind of question that you were talking about. I mean, because you see these companies that do come in and try to avoid like the really high standard that had been set in the Oak Ridge community, going back to the Manhattan Project by the building trades. You know, when they're bringing in people from out of state and not doing local hire and having to pay them a per diem, I mean, they just cannot be coming out ahead of just paying the actual package for the crafts and you know, giving them good benefits and good pay according to the standards that we set for that area.
What opportunities do you see to pressure Kairos to come to the table?
That is a good question. You know, I think really right now we're just trying to, you know, just continue to extend the opportunity for partnership and, you know, helping them get their project done on time and under budget. Yeah, I think continuing to kind of make the community more aware. I mean, I think there is like a, you know, just due to the history of Oak Ridge, there is, you know, we're getting a lot of support from the community. We're getting a lot of really good sympathetic media coverage locally. I think just continuing to make Kairos aware that, you know, this is something that the community wants. When they say, you know, they have a lot to say about why they chose Oak Ridge specifically, the existing kind of network of partners that they could tap into, all of this infrastructure that is intimately tied up with the building trades unions. I think, you know, that is something that we want to continue to kind of hone in on and just get them to, there's a lot of benefits for a PLA that we just want to make them aware of.
What can listeners do to help?
I think, you know, listeners, I mean, just getting out there and just kind of, you know, there's not a lot as far as, I mean, I think just kind of correcting the record on these kind of topics that we've talked about already, and just getting the word out that this is something that people want and that people support it. And, you know, our messaging is not to be hostile or anything like that in our orientation toward Kairos. You know, it's just a California-based company coming into Tennessee, and we want to see it benefit working Tennesseans. So just helping us kind of put that word out there will be really beneficial for what we're trying to accomplish.
You've been talking so far in your capacity as business representative for the Knoxville Building and Construction Trades Council, but as I mentioned, you've got another hat. You're president of the Knoxville Oak Ridge Central Labor Council. And in that capacity, you do a lot of work trying to bring together the building and construction trades unions, you know, like the iron workers, the electrical workers, and some of the non-building and construction trades unions like OPEIU or, you know, so you've got a bunch of them up there. What are some of the things that the Labor Council has been doing over the last couple of years that you're really proud of?
Yeah, you know, I'm really proud of the rapid kind of growth that we've seen in the past, even just the past year. We brought in 11 new affiliates.
Wow.
You know, brought in a significant, you know, number of building trades as well as industrial unions and, you know, campus workers in particular that actually started at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. That's been huge. Right now we have, you know, a full spectrum of the working class in our area represented. You know, it's really exciting to, you know, go to a Central Labor Council meeting and see musicians, grocery store workers, bus drivers, iron workers, which is my union, Iron Workers Local 384. And we, you know, really have been trying to continue to just connect the dots. There's a lot of labor actions going on in town. We have the McKay's workers organized by the Communications Workers of America that are picketing right now. McKay's is a bookstore locally here in Knoxville. The Starbucks workers are striking at the Alcoa store near Knoxville. And so we try to just, you know, anytime we have the opportunity to go to one of these actions, just kind of supporting it, showing some solidarity, getting other folks kind of to come out to the, you know, getting these industrial unions to come to the building trades, picket and vice versa. But yeah, I mean, we're working on a strategic planning process to really try to bring together a comprehensive, concrete vision for a unified labor movement in our jurisdiction. And we've gotten a lot of really exciting buy-in on that and really opening up our labor temple's doors to the community and to workers that aren't necessarily in unions, along with our union affiliates, to come to social events and everything like that without necessarily a structured agenda, but also programs like the Knoxville Workers Assembly that is trying to really bring together unorganized workers those are the kind of things that I'm really excited about, where we're kind of giving more opportunities to people in the community, or not necessarily organized yet, or in the process of organizing workers to get plugged into what the Central Labor Council is doing, so that we can just kind of bring together this unified labor movement.
One of the things that I know that you're, you mentioned you're working on your strategic plan, and you've got a bunch of committees that are kind of you've tasked with work to do, outside of the regular business meetings of the council. How do you tap into members of your affiliates and get them to be willing to volunteer more of their time with the Labor Council, when, no doubt there are a lot of similarities between our Labor Council here in North Alabama and yours up in Knoxville and Oak Ridge, Tennessee. A lot of our delegates are either full-time workers that also volunteer as stewards and don't get paid for it, or maybe they're full-time, business representatives for their union. And so they've got a lot of work to do with their union. How do you get them to kind of to be willing to dedicate more time to building the Labor Council?
It's a great question. I mean, it's something that it's been a real, challenge. It's not been overnight that we've been able to get these standing committees really rolling and active. And there's kind of been times where we've had to pause and reconfigure and kind of move again. Thankfully, we're really starting to pick up steam in a lot of these committees, but I really think kind of demonstrating the value of bringing all these unions together and having more of a presence in the community to these affiliates, and getting more people to the council that, we're able to kind of have more collective capacity. We're able to delegate more of the work in in a realistic fashion where, it's not really, we don't want to burn out any individual person with too much responsibility, because like you said, they're either employed in their union represented job, or they're working as a union representative themselves. So really just kind of divvying up the work, having a much larger kind of contingent of delegates coming to the council has been really beneficial in kind of getting things moving, where we can kind of, because just like everybody else, I know I'm really busy, got a lot going on, but being able to kind of, I've got a manageable kind of piece of the work, and everybody else does as well. That's been really helpful. So just doing everything we can to increase participation through these other kind of avenues, like, we brought in affiliates through our socials. We brought in new delegates through our socials. We have our strategic planning committee itself is open to allied organizations and non-affiliated members, so that they can get plugged in even if they're not able to be a delegate, and that kind of adds to our capacity as well. Building relationships with the University of Tennessee, for example, among other groups, and getting access to things like an intern at the Labor Council to help us with research that plugs into our strategic planning process and everything else. It's been really helpful in kind of getting more energy and momentum behind everything that we're doing.
We've been talking to Beau Hawk, business representative of the Knoxville Building and Construction Trades Council and president of the Knoxville Oak Ridge Central Labor Council. Beau, is there anything you'd like to leave us with before we let you go?
Just that this is a really exciting time to get involved. I mean, I think we can really, this is a time to think big and really bring people together around a vision of more power for working people in our area. I mean, we're in a region in the South where, I'm sure you talk about it on your show. It's historically anti-union. There's a lot of unique challenges to being here, but there's also, I think it's made us stronger and have, made us in many cases, it's forced us to be more creative and adapt to our conditions. And I think in the end, that's going to make us more powerful as we continue to build this movement.
My last question is, what stories should we be looking at as the Valley Labor Report over the next year in 2026? What stories should we be keeping track of? Is there anything that you're aware of that we should really be focusing on, or anything else that we can do as a labor media project to help build the movement in the year ahead?
That's a great question. I mean, I'm sure after this interview, I'll probably think of better answers. But aside from like the actions in our area that I was mentioning earlier, I think it's definitely something worth paying attention to. Is the quote unquote nuclear renaissance happening in Oak Ridge right now, with at least 10 companies with more on the way announcing major nuclear projects. So there's a lot of, billions of dollars being invested in energy production, and, it's intimately tied up with data centers and AI. As that continues to move forward and we, try to advocate for using union labor to build these projects and to continue the kind of history that we have of this higher standard of living for workers in the community brought to them by the unions. I think that's something to continue to look at as, things like the Kairos situation continue to play out and more companies come to the area.
Beau Hawk, thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're going to take a break. We will be right back. The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Midsouth Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communication system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us today. We got a bunch of folks hanging out with us in the chat and talking. Appreciate that. We have Joe, as always, and the Facebook, and we have a fellow watching us on chat, Kmart Radio DJ, saying, "Nice sweatshirt. Thank you. I appreciate it." I see that we have another One Piece fan tuning in, so there you go. I mentioned that there's a decertification petition that has been launched by a couple dozen workers, according to news reports, at the Volkswagen Chattanooga plant to get rid of the United Auto Workers, to decertify them as the union that represents, I think it's like 5,000 or 3,000 or 4,000 workers at the Volkswagen plant. And I am very skeptical that this is going to have very much legs for a few reasons. For one, the workers just voted by a supermajority to authorize a strike, so it would be very weird to have a supermajority of workers authorizing a strike and also then a majority of workers being interested in decertifying the union. That would be weird. And, you know, all along the way, workers have been continuing to make decisions to support the UAW. You know, the workers first got enough signatures on a petition to hold an election. Then workers voted by 75% to unionize. And then workers elected a bargaining committee. And then workers voted by supermajority to authorize a strike. So all along the way, contra what some of these, anti-union workers are saying, contra their points, workers have had opportunities for input all along the way. And that has been a very frustrating thing to see, is their accusations that the UAW is not allowing input from Volkswagen employees, because that's just not true. It is just simply not true. And, you know, you can like that or you can not. But, as somebody who finds himself consistently in the minority as it relates to political opinions or thoughts about maybe what the labor movement should do, you know, I'm constantly finding myself as a minority opinion in lots of instances. You know, you can't just go around and lie about what's happening. You know, it would be crazy for a Democrat in Alabama to go around having press conferences and talking to the news media and saying a majority of people in the state of Alabama are strong Democrats. A majority of people in the state of Alabama want Democrats to represent us. I mean, it's just not true, right? It's just simply not the case. And so if you are a Democrat in the state of Alabama or in the state of Tennessee, you know, you gotta work with reality and try to make change. And so if you are, you know, a non-union worker or an anti-union worker at the Volkswagen plant in Chattanooga, you got a couple of options. You know, you could say, you know, you want to be a part of the union and you want your voice to be heard, and you want to participate in the process of building a strong union at Volkswagen, getting a good contract, negotiating things that workers want, making sure that your voices are heard. Or you can try to fight the union, but an option that is not available is pretending that a majority of workers are, want to accept what Volkswagen has offered. Because that's clear. You know, if a majority of workers wanted the Volkswagen offer, they would not have voted to authorize a strike, right? So you got to deal with things as they are. And you know, like I said, workers at Volkswagen have had opportunities all along the way to have their input heard. And the offer that is being presented by Volkswagen is not up to par with what UAW workers at other automotive manufacturers get across the country, including right here in the state of Tennessee on the other side of the state in Spring Hill at GM, right? And it's not like Volkswagen does not have the money to match those, to match the big three compensation packages. Volkswagen only pays something like 4% of the price of a car goes to wages for Volkswagen cars. Goes to wages and compensation. There's enormous room for improvement. Volkswagen has made billions of dollars in profits. And so I think some of that money should go to the workers. And so we'll obviously be keeping keeping an eye on this decertification petition. If you're a Volkswagen employee, let us know how your coworkers are reacting to the decertification petition. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. If you're a non-Volkswagen worker in Chattanooga or in the general area, let us know what you think about it. 844-899-TVLR. But we'll be keeping an eye on it. Let's go ahead and get to Boss Watch. Boss Watch is our sort of sister segment to Last Week in Southern Labor. Last Week in Southern Labor, we like to take a look at what workers are up to. Boss Watch, we like to take a look at what bosses are up to with an eye for the South and the American colonies. Starting in Florida, Marriott Vacations Worldwide and Marriott Ownership Resorts, they are sellers of timeshare programs for hotels and vacation clubs, agreed to settle a religious discrimination lawsuit brought by the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission for $175,000 and significant non-monetary relief. The EEOC's suit charged that management at Marriott Vacations Worldwide and Marriott Ownership Resorts initially provided a religious accommodation for a Seventh-day Adventist employee, which allowed her to avoid Saturday shifts so she would not have to work on her religion's Sabbath. After a change in management, the companies revoked her religious accommodation and began scheduling her to work on Saturdays. Although the employee made repeated complaints about losing her religious accommodation, the employer continued to schedule her for Saturdays, negatively impacting her sales and commissions and forcing her to choose between her work and her faith, leading to her resignation around June 2023, according to the suit. Such alleged conduct violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits discrimination because of an individual's religion and requires employers to reasonably accommodate an employee's religious beliefs and practices unless doing so would cause an undue hardship. The EEOC filed suit in the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of Florida after first attempting to reach a pre-litigation settlement through its administrative conciliation process. The 3-year consent decree resolving the lawsuit requires the defendants to provide $175,000 in monetary relief to the former employee, update certain religious accommodation policies at their Sheraton Vacation Club properties in Florida, provide specialized training to managers, supervisors, and human resources personnel who manage and advise sales executives at their Sheraton Vacation Club properties in Florida, and post a notice in their workplace informing employees of the settlement and of their right to be free from workplace discrimination. Furthermore, the company will provide the EEOC with periodic reports regarding requests for religious accommodations at the Sheraton Vacation Club properties in Florida. Over in D.C., the U.S. Department of Labor has recovered $596,000 for 31 workers who were denied their full wages and fringe benefits by a Maryland-based subcontractor involved in a kickback scheme during the construction of 2 affordable housing developments funded by the District of Columbia. The department's Wage and Hour Division investigated J. Solano HVAC LLC, an air conditioning, heating, and ventilation company based in Silver Spring, Maryland, and its owner, Jose Williams Solano, and found that they violated the Davis-Bacon Act while working as a subcontractor on the Carl F. West Estates and Northwest 1 Phase 2 projects, both located in Northwest Washington, D.C. The department determined that J. Solano HVAC and Solano made verbal agreements with sheet metal workers and pipe fitter mechanics that they would receive the full prevailing wage rate via check, but then required workers to return any wages they received that exceeded $30 an hour. Additionally, the department found the employer wrongly classified some workers as lower skilled laborers, and in doing so, the employer did not pay the proper prevailing wage rates, including the basic hourly rate, holiday pay, and fringe benefits, in violation of the Davis-Bacon Act. The division debarred J. Solano HVAC and its owner from bidding on federally funded construction projects for a period of 3 years because of the willful nature of the violations. This segment of Boss Watch, Union Busters, covers national updates, and it's sponsored by Labor Lab. Labor Lab is an employer watchdog organization committed to safeguarding the right to organize through unions, collective bargaining, and mutual aid. They do this by combing through reports that Union Busters are required to file with the Department of Labor. Here are the new filings for this week, and this one I thought is particularly interesting. Adam, you need to take this to the CWA. Neptune Technology Group in Alabama hired David Craig and Company for $150 an hour. This is his first filing with the OLMS as a union buster. He was a subcontractor for Legacy Management Advisors previously, but Legacy Management Advisors has never filed an LM20. Craig ran uncontested for Hooper City Council in 2025 and previously was the vice president of learning and development at AAA Mountain West Group. In 2021, Craig spoke as a citizen supporter of a Utah bill that would require equal custody for parents in custody provisions. The Utah Stop Abuse campaign opposed the bill. Additionally, Preble Street Resource Center in Maine hired Drummond, Woodsum, and McMahon for $230 an hour. There is a union election running currently. Their cover story on their website focuses on land conservation projects in Maine and New Hampshire. Their practice areas cover everything from affordable housing and community development to AI and healthcare to tribal nations law. One of their practice areas is employment and labor, which includes collective bargaining, union representation, elections and proceedings, and conflict management. Drummond Woodsum is partnering with the ACLU of New Hampshire and the National Education Association, among others, to oppose HB 2 in New Hampshire that seeks to remove DEI programs from public entities. In relation to 2025 ICE raids, Drummond suggested that schools destroy records that denote if a student is not a citizen to obstruct and prevent federal immigration officials from enforcing anti-immigrant laws. In 2024, employees of Drummond Woodsum donated $147,000 to political campaigns, nearly all of which were to Democrats. That is fascinating. And we also have Rutland Regional Medical Center in Vermont hiring O'Mara and Associates for $300 an hour, and Empire Dairy in California hiring Red Group Enterprises for $350 an hour with a $10,000 retainer. I mean, huge sums of money going to these folks. Workers beware, that is for sure. And finally, as a reminder, due to a lack of enforcement, a lot of these labor relations consultants, these anti-union folks, the union busters, they're going to disregard the law and fail to report their activities to the U.S. Department of Labor. Therefore, it is crucial for organizers and workers to report suspected persuader activity to the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Labor Management Standards. You can do that via email at olms-public@dol.gov, by calling them at 202-693-0123, or by contacting your nearest OLMS district office. If you need assistance, you can contact Labor Lab at contact@laborlab.us. That is going to be it for the first half of the program. We have got an exciting second half of the program lined up for you. We're going to be talking to Chris Dols, Executive Director of the Federal Unionists Network, about federal worker organizing and the Protect America's Workforce Act. We're going to be reacting to a couple of clips and taking your calls at 844-899-TVLR. One more time, that is 844-899-8857. Give us a call about anything. We would love to talk to you, and excited to continue the program. If you and you can find us online at Facebook and YouTube at the Valley Labor Report. We're also now streaming on Twitch and TikTok at TVLR FM. Adam, we got about 60 seconds before we head off of the radio. Do you have any plugs?
Yes, go to labornodes.org/events. They have some cool workshops coming up, including December 17th. workers organizing to protect immigrants. On January 5th, they have an online workshop running for union office, which is something I hope many of our listeners will do in the year ahead. And January 6th, they have what to do when your union breaks your heart. So you can go to labornotes.org/events. And yeah, please run for union office this year. We'd love to hear about it.
Absolutely. Keep us in the loop. So yeah, everybody, appreciate your time. Give us a call, 844-899-TVLR. Find us online, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, TikTok, at The Valley Labor Report, to continue listening to the program, where once again we will be talking to Chris Dols, Executive Director of the Federal Unionists Network. We'll be continuing our conversation about Matt Walsh. We'll also be talking about a Tennessee employee who was fired for statements that she made in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death. She is now suing the state over her firing, and we've got a clip from her that's very interesting. So lots to talk about in the second half of the program. Once again, find us online, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Twitch, at The Valley Labor Report to continue listening. But if you don't do that, I appreciate your time, and we'll see you next week. All right. We're off the radio now. Appreciate everybody staying tuned. Looking forward to the second half of the program. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
This is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio and online news outfit in the South. Coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley in the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people in the South and all over the country. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you spending some time with us. If you'd like to call in, the phone number is 844-899-8857. Those lines are open. That phone number is 844-899-TVLR. As you can see, Adam is not able to join us in studio today. He's joining us via Zoom, which is a bummer because I have discovered a new chickpea recipe. I like roasted chickpeas a lot. I roast like salted chickpeas and put them on my salad. And I have discovered a dessert kind of snacky chickpea. It's honey cinnamon roasted chickpeas. I've got a bunch of them right here. I don't know if they look that appetizing really on the camera, but they're quite good. And I was going to share them with Adam, but he is not here to partake. So what a bummer.
Well,
is Adam still there?
Hopefully I'll see you soon, and
right.
you know, you can save me a few for sure. Yeah, I really appreciate the thought. Yeah, I hate to not be in studio today, but unfortunately, my car's in the shop. So
yeah,
it is what it is.
Is what it is. I've got a bunch of
show this morning. You've had a good show this morning.
I've enjoyed it. I've got a bunch of pre-tapes lined up for this afternoon that y'all will be hearing. So like I said earlier in the program, this is going to be our last live broadcast of the year. On December 20th and December 27th, we will be broadcasting, like doing a premiere sort of deal. And those programs will be a mix of pre-tapes and best ofs. But I can go ahead and share with you the interviews that I have, just the interviews that I've confirmed, which is a bunch. And I'm excited about that. And I'll be doing a bunch of those this afternoon. I'll be talking to a journalist who wrote a story about domestic workers fighting the revocation of their minimum wage protections. I'm also going to be talking to the president of the Alberta Federation of Labor about their worker agenda in the province in Canada and their almost general strike that happened a little bit like last month. I'll be talking to Ed Flash Ferentz, the host of America's Workforce, America's only daily union talk radio program, I believe. Be talking to him, doing a sort of year-in review, taking a look at the labor movement and politics as it relates to working people and unions. I'm also going to be talking to one of the producers of the Alabama Solution, talking about, some of the behind the scenes of the making of that movie and its implications, some of the news that has come out since the movie has come out. And Jazz Brizak, one of the original organizers of Starbucks Workers United. We'll be talking to them about their new book and the Starbucks campaign, where it's at, where it's going, stuff like that. So lots of good conversations lined up, and maybe a couple more. So, still going to be some good stuff. Still going to be some good stuff to talk about or to tune in for on the 20th and the 27th, but we will not be live. There'll be pre-tapes and best ofs. So we do have a caller on the line. This caller is from a 714 area code. I believe I know who this is. 714, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yes, good morning. Buenos dias to all the comrades out there. My name is Jose Francisco Negrete, Teamster Rank and File from 952 UPS, 27 years. Part of Teamster Mobilized, part of Labor for Palestine, part of the Boycott Home Depot Coalition. And we had the Boycott Home Depot Coalition had an action at a Home Depot in Torrance, California, kind of conservative area. And it was a good action. We had a good turnout. I encourage everyone all your listeners, the comrades, to please continue boycotting Home Depot. Look for other mom and pop mortar hardware stores for your supplies. We can't be supporting Home Depot when they're letting ICE, run around their stores, kidnapping people. Of course, we know what they do in their parking lots. And also Home Depot likes to put those big old bags of gravel or rock, or I don't know what it is. They like to put it where some of the community members put their little tents up to help out the day laborers with, or jornaneros, with called in Spanish, with food and other supplies. So let's continue putting the pressure on Home Depot, but also let's, with this moment that Home Depot sees itself in the spotlight for nefarious reasons, I think it's also important to try to push for a unionization effort with the Home Depot workers. Same like the jornaneros, all they want is dignity and respect. So we should go out there when we have these actions, we have these rallies, to talk to them, to tell them there is a better way. I know some of them don't like what's happening with the jornaderos, because some are,
right,
children of immigrants. So it's important for them, to understand that they have power too, and they need to organize. And I know Home Depot is a union busting effort. And on the Teamster front, the Fearless Slate is going to have a town hall November 20th, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, and 11 a.m. Pacific time. You could go on b-fearless.org, or that's their website. You could check them out on their Instagram too, Fearless Slate. And the link is bit.ly/B Fearless TH2. So, to all the Teamsters that are upset with how Sean O'Brien is running this local, the UPS contract is turning out to be historic, but for all the wrong reasons. You have we saw what happened to Yellow several years ago. There was a Molson strike in Texas that got kind of shut down. It was publicized with one post by the IBT. Then after that, they pulled it down because, the members that were rejecting the contract, which I think the IBT kind of approved, but the members didn't. So, if you have concerns how Sean O'Brien is running our union, I encourage everybody to hop on that town hall on the 20th and listen and meet the candidates that are running, against Sean O'Brien, because we need those voices need to be heard. And Teamsters have concerns. Ask them what's their vision for the Teamsters? How are they going to move forward? What are they going to do with the labor movement? Because right now the Teamsters seem like to be on a whole different island than the labor movement. I'm glad that the IBT sanctioned the Starbucks United Workers ULP strike, but other than that, we've just been detached. And 2026 is coming around the corner, and hopefully this is a year of solidarity. There was a lot of things that we reacted to when President Trump came into office, but now in 2026, we see how this is not going to stop. This is going to be the year of solidarity. We need to understand that word more than ever between all of us, people of good conscience, labor, the working class, whether you're documented or not, you're a citizen or not, we need to come together. And I'll leave you with this, and I'll take my comments off air. I'd rather die in empathy than live in apathy, because I see too much apathy with the labor. When we say, labor is an all-time high, yes, but but that still hasn't attributed to concrete gains for labor. So with that, thank you, gentlemen, for everything you do. Check out Boycott Home Depot Coalition on Instagram, and hopefully you could start something up in your neck of the woods, and let's be there in the fight. I have friends everywhere, so it's time that we link arms. Gentlemen, have a great weekend, and thank you for all you've done.
Appreciate the call, Jose. Thank you. If you want to get where he is, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We do have another caller on the line, this one from a 229 area code. Let's go ahead and bring them on the air. 229 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, is this me?
Yes.
Cool. Hey, this is Tim calling from Asheville, North Carolina. I called in a month or two ago talking about Asheville City Association of Educators, the Meet Confirm meetings going on. Had another update.
Yes. Tell us about it. What's going on?
Yeah, so we've had 3 meetings now, and out of those 3 meetings, we have moved 2 items through consensus, and those items will either go to the school board to vote on as policy, or they will go directly to the superintendent for implementation there. Last month, this is the first item, we officially moved that all staff can now work from home on optional teacher work days. That's, barring that, that's required by a supervisor to be there. So essentially, a lot of classroom-based staff, if this would be really beneficial for them. They won't have to use their leave just to work from home, or they won't have to bring their kids to work. And then the meeting this month, we saw some real improvements in our district's inclement weather policy. So now it is moved that the district must decide any schedule changes to the day due to the inclement weather. They must decide that by 6 a.m. And all staff are given the option to work from home on inclement weather days, again, barring that they're not required to be there. And if the staff is required to be there, that'd be, a lot of maintenance workers or custodial workers. When they do report to work, they are given time and a half to honor them coming in on a inclement weather day when they, could potentially be working from home or could take the leave off. And say if they're, we have bus drivers who are on the road at 5 a.m. or even custodians who show up at 5 a.m. as well. But so if they're there before the call is made at 6 a.m., it is retro. So that whole time that they've been at work will be time and a half.
That's awesome. Those sound like real improvement, not just sort of, little bits and pieces. I mean, those sound like real deal improvements. That's awesome, Tim. Thank you for sharing with us. That's great.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we're feeling really good about it. I've talked to a couple of our support staff, cafeteria people, custodial people, stuff like that, and they were very surprised and very like, oh, okay, this is something real. This is something that's gonna actually matter to my life. So people are very ecstatic about it.
Fantastic. Well, Tim, thanks for the call. Appreciate the update.
Of course.
If you want to get where he is, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We'll continue taking the calls through the program. We've got a guest on the line now, though. Chris Dols is Executive Director of the Federal Unionists Network. He joins us via Zoom. Chris, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. Thanks for taking the time.
Great to be with you, Jake.
Really excited to have you. You were at one point president of IFPTE Local 98 up in New York. Are you still president of that local?
Technically, I am, but I've been on a bit of a leave, mostly because I just had a baby, and they're doing new elections, and they'll be replacing me in title. The local is in good hands. The rest of the executive board there is still working at the Army Corps of Engineers. I left my post in the federal government in May to become co-executive director of the fund, the Federal Unionists Network, which I started along with several other local presidents and officers and many rank and file federal workers a couple years ago.
That is, that is such a scary move to make. So I applaud you for making it, and I've loved the work that y'all have been doing, particularly obviously over the last year, and we're going to get into that. But before we get into kind of fun specific work, and I don't know how much fun sort of participated in this, but the House of Representatives, as you know, just passed the Protect America's Workforce Act. For folks who don't know, the Protect America's Workforce Act, if enacted, would rescind President Trump's executive orders, which revoked collective bargaining rights, at least on paper, for most federal workers. About 1 million federal workers lost their collective bargaining rights on paper because of his executive orders. The Protect America's Workforce Act would revoke that, and the House of Representatives passed it, pretty overwhelmingly, about as overwhelming as you get on anything that's remotely controversial. It had 20 Republicans voting with the rest of the Democrats in favor of this legislation. And I'm interested in your thoughts on it, because I find myself going, on the one hand, from thinking that this is actually really impressive. You get 20 Republicans on the record directly rebuking Trump administration executive order, and a pretty just kind of straightforward Republican policy. Republicans being anti-union for government employees that's not the most radical thing that the Trump administration has done. And so to get that many Republicans on board rebuking him in that way seems significant. But then on the other hand, I can't help but feeling like it's a bit of an effort in futility, because it does not seem like the Senate will pass it. And even if the Senate does pass it, which would be huge, the president is obviously not going to sign it. He's not going to sign a revocation of his executive order. And so this is just almost certainly not going to become law, whereas the Norcross amendment to the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, that felt to me a little bit more interesting, but it was left out ultimately. The House did originally include it in their NDAA, but it was left out of the one that went to the president's desk last week. And so, I don't know. I'm really going back and forth on sort of the importance of this passing the House, and I'm curious what you make of it as the executive director of this new federal worker formation, the Federal Unionists Network, that has been really at the forefront of fighting for federal worker rights. Your whole job now is talking to federal workers about how they can best fight for their rights. What do you make of these legislative developments?
Just to zoom out a little bit first, I think if you think about the stage at which events are unfolding if you think of Congress as the stage where politics unfolds, you're gonna drive yourself nuts, because yes, there's hope in 20 Republicans slipping the leash from Trump's previous pretty uncontested control of the party, and that's a big deal. It's probably the biggest deal in my opinion about this development, and we can talk about that. But if you just think about and I'm in the weeds too, and people should be in the weeds. People should know about the different proposals, and some of them represent real threats. Some of them are, promising potential developments. But to your point, Trump's not going to sign it. Even in the unreal scenario where they had like a veto-proof majority, the law only undoes an executive order he passed earlier this year. He could just issue another executive order. There's a deeper question here about what's the power of the federal workforce in particular, because it's a federal workforce bill, but also what's the balance of power in the United States right now between capital and labor? Let's boil right down to it, right? The bosses have built over the past several decades massive concentration of wealth and power, while union density has reduced. The federal sector in particular has been weakening and weakening. The looming shadow of the PATCO defeat affected the entire labor movement, but it was a federal sector strike and defeat. And so its impacts were particularly looming over recent decades. And so the overall balance of forces are such that we're not going to sneak anything past them right now. There's not going to be any surprise legislative victory that transforms the labor legal regime in this country that suddenly starts to favor workers. So you'll drive yourself nuts if you spend your time exclusively looking at the congressional stage. Not saying that you shouldn't. Lots of important potential developments there, opportunities to megaphone through our allies in Congress, and we do have some real allies. Draw out the hypocrisy of the other side, all that's true, but the deeper question, I think that the other stage we need to spend a lot of time, and I know you guys, of course, do this on your program, and probably one of the best radio programs doing it, is look at the different stages of the streets and the workplace. What's been happening in the streets all year long. There's been a growing movement of forces who are, not just fed up with like the growing inequality of recent decades, but are like really frightened by and willing to fight against the consolidation of autocratic power in the hands of, this tiny 0.0001% of the billionaire elites who are really looking to consolidate, all the gains of neoliberalism of the last several decades and transfer and actually put power back in popular hands and reassert democracy in this country in a way that it's been slipping away for actually a long time. This year, I think, just represents a consolidation of that process, under the personality of Trump. So to me, that's the bigger conversation that we spend most of our time in the fund paying attention to. Yes, we do engage on the congressional stuff, but I think we're not going to slip anything past, these folks. They are far better funded, far better organized. They have, consolidated power over the media, despite all the lies about Trump that Trump levels against the media. So like the deeper question is a bit of a longer haul fight that we have to wage. And that gets at the work that we've been doing in the Federal Unionists Network to activate a much deeper, broader layer of federal workers in solidarity with the broader labor movement and working class, and also all the social movements and organizations that see the threat represented by this administration. So that social movement is the much more important, I think, set of dynamics that we have to be paying attention. Yes, let's understand what's going on in Congress, but we're not gonna sneak a victory past these people. We're gonna actually have to build the forces and the unions and the power to beat them back.
And I'm really excited about talking to you about how the Federal Unionists Network has been doing that. And you mentioned that there's been a growing resistance to what the Trump administration has been doing, and particularly right at the beginning as these attacks unfolded. We saw a lot of coverage of that growing resistance, particularly among federal workers. News about federal workers fighting back was really everywhere. And attacks on federal workers, news about that was everywhere. And then workers fighting back, workers winning some, workers losing more, just all over the news. A lot of it driven by, the way that mainstream media works a lot, I find, is there has to be a conflict, right? There has to be there have to be two characters, and the coverage was driven by a narrative of Elon and Doge versus federal workers. And now Doge has disbanded more than half a year earlier than it was planned to, without reaching really any of its stated goals. And now I think that you and I would believe that there were goals that went unstated, and maybe in some cases directly stated, that were more about demoralizing federal workers and decreasing federal worker power. But the stated goals was about, saving trillions of dollars and cutting waste and giving a lot of money back to the American people. And none of that has happened. Objectively, a complete failure, it seems to me, the Doge project, and we barely heard about it. We barely heard about this huge project being disbanded, and that's old news now. Like, it literally happened late in November, and there are probably a bunch of listeners who are hearing this for the first time, that Doge has been disbanded. And so, I've got a lot of questions associated with that, but I'm curious on the Doge part of it. What do you make of the fact that its dissolution has gone so unremarked upon?
I mean, I think it's important to understand that Doge, Elon Musk, the whole show of the first months of this administration. Remember the scene where, the Argentinian fascist president gave Musk a chainsaw, and it represented the spreading of, cutting waste and bureaucracy from, the Argentinian model to the American. That whole sideshow was, and I don't want to overstate this, but it was a bit of a show to attract attention, and it certainly succeeded at that. and not to say that it didn't directly cause all kinds of, like you said, trauma, and it actually did. It was the tool that was used to, gut entire agencies. Some of those effects have been reversed in legal cases, but overall, the Doge effect was, it advanced their cause. But you're right, it structurally doesn't exist. But there was something else happening in the background, which is the much less, the much quieter and deeper objective of this administration, as carried out by Russell Vogt and the OPM, that has now completely become indoctrinated top to bottom and throughout the entire federal government with the same principles, small government fundamentalism, erase and remove any remnants of enforcement of civil rights laws or, anti-poverty measures. You see what's happening around like the attacks on the city of Boston for daring to uphold like housing equality and basic, civil rights legislation, as now executed by a weaponized housing and urban development agency, and the widespread presence of retaliation against any federal workers who dare to blow the whistle on those violations of law. The attempts to, weaponize SNAP benefits, actually using hunger as a political weapon to discipline blue states. Like all of this is undergirded by a strategy, wielded by not some new invention, some silly named agency by, the kind of caricature of a billionaire Elon Musk, but by a kind of, he's not nameless and faceless. People know his name and face, but Russell Vogt is not a well understood character in popular politics, and his agenda, as wielded by the OPM, is not widely discussed or understood. And that's the deeper set of attacks that we actually face, and it is, on their terms, been extremely successful. And so the Doge distraction was a bit of a sideshow because, at the end of the day, Donald Trump is an entertainer. And he has entertained our country into this, fascist, hopefully dead end that we can get out of. But it's actually the Russell Vogts and the James Shirks and there's a whole bunch, the Grover Norquist, there's a whole army of increasingly right-wing folks who have, in fact, burrowed deep into the federal bureaucracy. Yes, through Doge, but more so just through good old-fashioned political appointments and OPM policy. And that stuff's all very much happening. And that's what federal workers are fighting against every single day. And so the struggle is on. Yes, the media coverage of it is not nearly what it was back in February, March, and April when it was still fresh and new and expressed itself in the streets. But it's happening between, what's left of our unions in the federal sector and management. It's happening locally. Sometimes it breaks out publicly into the streets, especially when there's moments of retaliation. But yeah, it's the struggle is very much there. The defeat of Doge, to me, I am generally, quick to celebrate our victories, but to me, the bigger problem has always been Russell Vogt, OPM, the official policy, and all that stuff is still on the march throughout the federal government. So yes, I'm glad to see Doge go. I'm glad to see Elon Musk and Donald Trump break up. I hope that, obviously they've kind of made amends. But to me, that's all a bit of a sideshow. And the deeper problem is still very much present, primarily in the form of Russell Vogt, but also his army of, ideologues that have infiltrated basically the entire federal government.
Yeah, I mean, Russell Vogt is just a much more serious character than Elon Musk, even though somehow Elon Musk is the richest man in the world and so has, more power than most people in the world. Russell Vogt, he's much more intelligent, at least about this stuff and about, inflicting pain.
They work together. They're working together. It's two parts of the same play, and they're advancing their agenda, but there's huge cracks in the coalition, which I think is what the Powell vote in the House shows. The Indiana Republicans refusing to follow along with Trump on the gerrymandering strategy. There are big cracks, and that's hugely hopeful, and it shows real promise for the prospects of reasserting democracy in the country.
You mentioned a little bit about what where the Federal Unionists Network sees the relevant stage for social change, kind of thinking less about what's happening in D.C. and what's happening in Congress as, kind of the movers in society, and more about what's going on in the streets and in the workplaces, and just generally in society, and trying to build a movement among federal workers, attaching those movements to the broader labor movement, the social movement, and I think that's a lot of what it is. But just to lay it out explicitly and on its own, can you remind people what the Federal Unionists Network is and what its theory of change is?
Yeah. So, the network started actually with a campaign that I think you and I first met around, which is 3 years ago now, in 2022. My first appearance on your program was to talk about an open letter campaign that we had targeting Chuck Schumer, one of my senators here in New York, and of course, at the time, the majority leader in the Senate, who was refusing to move along Joe Biden's pretty good nominees, very good nominees to the Federal Labor Relations Authority. We never restored, a Democratic appointed majority at the FLRA over those 4 years, despite everything people claim about Joe Biden's supposed labor, accomplishments. And back then, 2022, when we formed that campaign, at the time, maybe couldn't have known it, but it was the seed that became what is today the Federal Unionists Network. The 40 or so federal locals who signed on to that, many of us stayed in touch, and over the course of the next couple of years, we convened at labor notes. We met up regionally, in cities wherever we could. We, formed as a WhatsApp community, pretty informal, up until this year. And then this year, we came out fighting. In February of this year, we called a National Day of Action that, saw expression in some 35 cities, and that really put the fun on the map. The Federal Unionists Network became, a real fighting force at the national level. And we went from being, maybe a couple hundred people in a WhatsApp community to being, I think by May, there were some 16,000 federal workers who had reached out to us to be, part of the network, to help figure out how to activate their locals. The federal labor movement has been pretty sleepy for a long time. And that's in part what we were kind of responding to in organizing a campaign to pressure Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer wasn't feeling any accountability to the federal labor movement, and we emerged to try to create that accountability. We didn't win that campaign, but we did win by forming the basis of what is now a much more fighting federal labor movement. So, fast forward into 2025, we've used I can't believe it's only been 10, 11 months, really 7 months since I quit my post at the Army Corps of Engineers to do this full time. And now we're growing. We have a staff. We've raised a fair amount of money. We are, to answer your question, we're trying to organize federal workers primarily to strengthen their unions. We don't see the fun as the direct driver of the change we need. We see the broader federal workforce as the social force that's capable not only of, exercising the leverage it has in the broader economy. The federal workforce is extremely critical in all kinds of different places and ways, right? People think about air traffic controllers as the most obvious one, both because of the legacy of the PATCO strike, but also because every time there's a shutdown, everybody asks the questions like, why aren't the air traffic controllers getting paid? Are the skies safe to fly in? And so that's a particularly leveraged space, but also all the people who keep our food and water clean and healthy, all the people who maintain, my job was to maintain shipping channels. It's not as immediate leverage as an air traffic controller, but long-term, pretty critical stuff, right? Maintaining the navigability of our shipping channels. Every federal job in one way or another does something that Americans need. And so to get to the question, our theory of change is that if the federal workforce will actually exert its direct influence, both within our unions and vis-a-vis management, but also in alliance with a broader public who sees the importance of a robust and healthy public sector, then various all kinds of social transformation can be expected to flow from that, because the billionaire's influence can be pretty quickly eroded once a public sees the value of a public workforce. Now, that said, we're fighting to reverse decades of setbacks in terms of, the ideological place that the federal workforce holds in the public imagination, the actual subjective strength of our unions, again, which have been severely weakened in recent decades, just like the broader labor movement. So, it's not going to be overnight, but I think the critical thing to understand about the Federal Unionist Network, as distinct from, say, unions, which is, as a labor show, I think your listeners will appreciate, kind of like similar to some of the Reform Caucus efforts that you guys talk a lot about on your program. We're leveraged. We play a leveraged position. Again, we don't think that the fund is going to be the difference maker vis-a-vis Congress making the change. We think that if we activate our unions and help lead and influence our unions into a more fighting posture, then that in turn can have some cascading effects, not just through the labor movement we can influence, and not just through the agencies that we intend to influence and really shore up the missions that serve the public, but ultimately the broader politics, through some inspiration and hopefully solidarity with the broader public, and that constellation of forces can form a sufficient social movement that can, restore the democracy and maybe even institute a federal government that serves the common good in a way that we've probably never seen in this country. But there are some examples from history worth studying.
Yeah, I think that the comparison to the reform movements of the past, UAWD that elected Sean Fain, TDU, there are a couple of caucuses that call themselves CREW, both in the UFCW and the electrical workers and the electrical workers IATSE, and then when the UFCW it's Essential Workers for Democracy, EW4D. So I think those are really good comparisons, and the importance of activating our movement is really important. What would you say are some of the things that Fund has accomplished in the last year in particular that you're most proud of?
I mean, I think, have managed to put thousands. I wish it was tens of thousands. At some level, the tens of thousands that have done what I'm about to describe, it's true they have, but in a very disorganized way. Well, I think the major accomplishment of the fund has been to organize a process that has spread rather spontaneously because of the severity of the attacks that we faced, to organize a process by which, yes, tens, maybe even hundreds of thousands of federal workers have started talking to each other about the jobs they do, the power they have or don't have, the prospects of their unions being, fighting forces for democracy and change, and just their agencies doing what they're supposed to do. Like, that spread like wildfire spontaneously throughout the federal sector this year. And what the fund has done is organized that, not everywhere. I'm sure we missed more than we got, but what we got was big and often small pockets of federal workers in, I think we probably influenced, if not directly done this in every major agency, certainly every department. The vast majority of the agencies and I'd say all of the departments of the federal government have benefited from some intentional organization to capture that energy that otherwise, unfortunately, dissipated. There was lots of dissipated energy because of the state of disorganization of our movement. But I think we kind of arrived right in time to try to, incentivize our unions to build these structures, and where our unions maybe didn't do it, we built those structures, and we continue to build those structures. So we've begun to organize, and this isn't, going to be a news headline, but it is a serious development that will have consequences in the years to come, because to whatever extent we can build those pistons to capture the steam, to use a metaphor some people might remember, the more likely the future steam of our movement can actually be used to drive a vehicle that's much more powerful than when steam is just allowed to dissipate.
What are some of those structures that Fun is setting up itself, or that Fun has successfully encouraged unions to set up within their own structures to try to capture some of that steam?
I mean, the elemental form of any effective unionism, no matter what the sector, no matter what country, no matter where in the world or history you are, is the workplace organizing committee. And for us, that is the first question we always have for everybody, is like, which coworkers are you meeting with? How frequently? What are you guys talking about? And when are you next meeting? And so the workplace organizing committee, as the kind of basic building block of unionism, is the structure that we are attempting to make sure that everybody's having. And that can mean just, weekly lunches with your coworkers in your section. In some places with more like structurally sound unions, it can mean like making sure that those monthly meetings are happening and that they're democratic and that they're open spaces. But just like the more convening of workers talking together, it's not just in person, especially given, we're in 2025. Agency-wide convenings and having people from the same agency get together on Zoom calls every couple of weeks to talk through what's common, what's different. And so it's just like these elemental forms of workers talking to each other, having each other's back, sharing lessons. That's the basic form. Everything else is in service of that. So we're building a staff. We have a couple of new hires in a very young but exciting organizing department in the Federal Unionists Network. And, they're building out some digital infrastructure to support that. We're, developing some basic metrics so that we can track how we're doing and see what's working and what's not. So like I could talk about like the organizing, the metrics and this and the criteria that we apply to assess our growth, and all that's interesting stuff to, union organizer geeks like me. But like at the end of the day, the question is, are you talking to your coworkers? And when you get together, are you thinking about how you're going to reach that next layer that aren't at that meeting? When are you meeting next? And what are you going to talk about next to build the confidence and power of workers to, raise some demands with the boss in a way that everybody feels safe about? Anticipate the retaliation that you might face from the boss and not be surprised about it when it happens. Like all those basic building blocks of good organizing have to be happening worker to worker in the workplace. If that's not happening, you're not doing it. And whatever victories you may win by clever tricks of bargaining or lobbying, those are all going to be short term because you haven't built power underneath it.
Some of the most high-profile fights that the Federal Unionists Network have been a part of, to me, and I don't think that y'all have primarily framed it in this way, but to me they have felt very reminiscent of free speech fights that the IWW had 100 years ago, and that's with two of your and that fight has been around the protecting workers' rights to speak freely. Those have been some of the most high-profile fights that you've been in the last couple of months, and two of your most high-profile members have now been fired. Can you remind the audience what those two workers were fired for? Those being I think Ellen May and Paul Osadabe. And what does it say about the Trump administration that they pulled the trigger on firing those two civil servants?
Yeah, and Paul was part of a group of 4 whistleblowers, 2 of whom were public. So Paul and his coworker Palmer were, in fact, I don't think their termination has been concluded. I think they still are drawing a paycheck and still fighting their termination recommendation. And the same is true for Ellen May. But yeah, to give the backstory, 4 civil rights attorneys out of the Housing and Urban Development headquarters in D.C. back in September blew the whistle and really did it right. And it's worth for, people who are listening, for public employees, federal workers who might want to blow the whistle, really worth learning from the story of, of Paul and Palmer, the HUD whistleblower case. There was good news coverage of it in at the time. And that story continues to be extremely relevant, especially with this week's attacks on the city of Boston, which demonstrate they prove the truth of what Paul and Palmer and the others blew the whistle on, which is that this administration is weaponizing the Housing and Urban Development as an agency in order to roll back not just 4 years of Biden-era DEI policy, but 60, 80 years of civil rights legislation, the Fair Housing Act, all kinds of very important laws that uphold equal access to housing, equal access to the law. That's what they blew the whistle on, and much more. And folks should read the coverage. And if you don't have the link, I can get it for you to share on your website. But really important. Their report was long, extensive. I mean, these are lawyers And so theirs was a particularly comprehensive expression of high quality whistleblowing done in concert with members of Congress who, and very importantly, with a pretty significant layer of like civil rights organizations. I think a couple hundred of civil rights organizations were part of the coordination that went into that whistleblowing activity. So very effective. It's a real playbook, I think, and we in the fund are going to work on publishing some of those lessons about how to whistleblow effectively with partners from the community, from Congress, et cetera. In Ellen May's case, really just a kind of classic free speech case where on day 2 of the shutdown, October 2nd, she spoke on MSNBC and she just shared all publicly available information, contrary to what her management seems to be asserting. Everything she said was totally publicly available. She disclaimed her affiliation with the agency, said she was speaking in her union capacity and her personal capacity. And really all she said was what everybody was saying 3 weeks later, which is that if this shutdown goes into November, SNAP benefits are going to be lost for potentially millions of Americans. And sure enough, as November got closer, everybody was talking about this. And she works for the agency, Food and Nutrition Services, an agency within the United States Department of Agriculture. And her job is to help administer SNAP benefits. So she was just saying, she was warning the public that this shutdown and this administration's agenda is extremely dangerous to the most vulnerable people in our society. The next day, despite her agency being fully furloughed, some manager was told to work that day and send Ellen a termination notice. And her termination is still, it hasn't gone into effect yet. She has a hearing that's coming up next month. And she made the very brave decision to fight it, not just in her own defense to keep her job. She wants to continue, providing SNAP benefits for the public that needs it, but also in defense of the SNAP program itself. And this, I think, is a really critical strategic offering that the fund brings, which is that, the kind of common good unionism that you often hear about, that other unions have done so much, good work to advance in the labor movement in the last 10 to 15 years. In the fund, we take that stuff really seriously. So like Paul and Palmer making like the restoration of civil rights and civil rights laws through, their campaign to blow the whistle at HUD and maybe incur some personal risk. Ellen also, I don't think she expected the retaliation that she faced, but when it came, she said, I guess then I have to make my cause now, not just my own, getting my job back, but also fighting for SNAP benefits and, the 40-some million Americans who depend on SNAP benefits and a whole bunch of other programs that FNS administers to fight food insecurity in the country. So those are their stories. There are many others. I know in the last question I answered, I gave like the kind of what you're not going to hear on the news, right? The very private workplace to workplace organizing objectives that we accomplished this year. But there are also many other big victories where we've slowed the attack at NIOSH, where occupational safety health, laws and regulations, they attempted to completely eliminate the entire agency, and fund organizers and broader federal labor movement leaders successfully stopped. At the CDC, HHS as a department saw a ton of important critical activity to fight against the Trump administration, the RFK kind of vision for what public health should look like in this country. And agency by agency, fund activists and the broader labor movement in the federal sector has won a bunch more victories in mostly like in what we've slowed down. I don't want to overstate it. We haven't yet reversed the tide, but I do think that that's possible. Maybe in 2026, but that's what we're building an infrastructure to do, is to maintain the confidence and fighting kind of spirit of the federal labor movement, because the trauma has been real, but it hasn't sidelined us all.
And it is worth noting, as you said, there are so many other instances of the free speech of government workers being curtailed by not just even the Trump administration, although we have examples of that, for example, with FEMA, but also state workers in Texas. There was an employee at the comptroller's office who literally just promoted the No Kings protest on his personal social media page, where he did not identify himself as an employee of the Texas state government, and didn't even say anything. He just said, I don't like Trump. If you don't like Trump, you should come out here. There's going to be organizations that you can join and organize with. And that got him fired. I mean, there really is a growing aversion to allowing people to have opinions and a job if those opinions are not in line with the regime. And it's very concerning. And I'm proud to, be part of a labor movement that's fighting for workers to be able to have both an opinion and a job, and to be a supporter of the Federal Unionists Network that's working towards the same goal. How is, I think you've already talked about, a lot of what you have built in the last year is just going to continue into 2026, but I'm wondering if there's anything that you've left out that you want to highlight about how the Federal Unionists Network is going to continue to build power in 2026.
So I want to build on the point you just made about the state of Texas public employee, because it's a good example of how the federal government is a real trendsetter. Yeah, people say that the federal government should be a model employer. Well, the fact is, it's always a model employer. Sometimes the model is a good one that upholds workers' rights, et cetera. And sometimes it's what we've got right now, which is setting the tone that, DEI must be reversed everywhere, and therefore all the most racist bosses in the country, private sector, public sector, state, federal, all of them feel a free hand to be their racist selves in the workplace. And and we've seen that in the form of, I think New York Times recently reported that very similar numbers, actually. About 315,000 federal workers have left the labor force in 2025, and 319,000 Black women have left the labor force in 2025. And I think the congruence of those numbers actually reflects, maybe coincidentally, the congruence of the political agenda. And in the way that this administration has been a trendsetter and making the federal government a model for the absolute worst kind of bosses in the country, we're seeing that. And your example of the Texas state employee facing retaliation for their speech, public employees have traditionally been the workers with the most free speech protections. Private employers, unfortunately, have always been, or largely been, quite free to, fire employees for what they say on their own time. But public employers have generally been prohibited from doing so because of the Constitution. But obviously, this administration is seeking to roll back, all kinds of aspects of the Constitution, certainly those that protect workers and free speech. One other thing, so I think that model kind of employer point really needs to be taken stock of by the broader labor movement. That's my point, right? Is that if this administration gets away with its attacks on the federal workforce, they have, and it's already begun to come for the broader workforce. So the broader labor movement has a very direct interest in standing with the federal workforce. And we've seen a lot of that, but, it's been uneven, troublingly uneven. The other point I want to make, actually, to bring back to the first question you said, because while I stand by what I said about, we're not going to sneak any victories past them, given that we don't have deeper power to build those victories off of, they will sneak victories and have snuck victories past us all year long because of the power imbalance. And there's one really important one I just want to highlight for your listeners, which is, while there's been some, positive congressional initiative in the form of the Protect American Workforce Act, or the rider to the NDAA that you mentioned that unfortunately wasn't included, the other side is also trying to sneak past labor really bad laws that in theory uphold the rights or interests of federal workers, but the truth is it's actually going to represent a massive attack on the rights of federal workers. And here I'm talking about the bill that's been sponsored by Ron Johnson. It was first introduced in the context of the shutdown, a few weeks back. I don't think it's the last we've seen about it, and folks should know about this bill because it might even, I forget the name of it, but the kind of banner headline of the bill is to pay federal workers during shutdowns. And it's like, that sounds great. That's the primary problem with shutdowns from the federal workers' point of view, right? But it would give the executive branch, yes, it would pay federal workers through shutdowns, but it would basically sever all congressional strings attached to what the executive branch does in the context of the shutdown. So if you're Russell Vogt, and you want to remake the entire federal government top to bottom, then you just want to live in a shutdown. And because nothing about it says that they can't riff, reduce in force. Nothing about it says that they can't just straight up close entire agencies, reorganize entire workforces inside of agencies. So it would continue to pay federal workers, but it would also simultaneously completely free the hand of the administration to put those now still paid federal workers outside of the context of congressional oversight and all the strings attached that come with congressional funding. Because it's not just congressional funding that we need congressional funding attached to certain missions, right? And that's the accountability between Congress and the White House that makes federal employment something that is a public good. But if you just give a fascist administration a free hand to, yes, pay us, but for how long until they fire large numbers of it's a really dangerous maneuver. And unionists and the broader public needs to keep their eyes on this, because if they sneak this bill past us, then it's like it's a worst case scenario, in my opinion, in terms of an unleashed Trump administration. They'll just govern in a shutdown mode and stop even pretending to follow Congress's dictates, because Congress won't have passed any bills signing, informing how they should govern. And so it'll just be a Trump government funded. The workforce will be funded, and the Russell votes and the rest of the hacks in this administration will have a free hand to make of the executive branch anything they want, completely outside of any congressional pretense, any congressional control. So that the Johnson bill, we all have to keep an eye on that and understand that is not something labor can support. And if anything, we need to, kind of lift the mask on it. And nobody should be surprised. Ron Johnson's never done a damn thing for a worker in his life. So nobody should be surprised that this is a terrible bill, but we all have to oppose it.
Yeah, I am so glad that you said that, because I had our senators, Katie Britt and Tommy Tuberville, sponsored that bill, and so I didn't look much into it beyond the reporting, and the reporting in Alabama did not mention any of that. It just mentioned like what it does with respect to a government shutdown. So it pays workers, it requires Congress people to stay in D.C. It doesn't pay Congress people. It's a 2-week continuing CR until there's a budget passed. Every 2 weeks it renews, and so I thought, oh well, that's fine. But I didn't realize that it severed the strings that were attached to like a normal, actual clean CR. And I am a little bit embarrassed about how, even though it was cautious, about how, cautiously positive I was about the legislation. I appreciate I don't want to
purport to be an expert on it, and I'm doing more research now, but like it really smells like a rotten fish, and there's no protections against RIFs, reorgs, closing of agencies. Now, this is an administration that's clearly willing to break the law anyway. And so if the law now allows a much freer hand and there are no strings attached, I mean, what does it mean to fund the payment of federal workers without congressional authorization of the programs that they are supposed to be providing? Now they can repurpose the entire federal workforce, or at least those that fall into that category, for whatever Russell vote wants. And that's a very, very dangerous scenario. So yeah, I think I have to do more homework on it. I'm thinking of writing something in the next week or so about it, because I see this as a very dangerous maneuver that we can't let them sneak past us.
How can listeners and particularly federal workers get connected with the Federal Unionists Network?
So I think it's open to the public. Yeah. Tomorrow we're doing this year in review event. I dropped a link in the chat if you could pass it on, through your site or otherwise. There's a little Action Network link you can sign up to attend, especially federal workers. We're interested in federal workers coming together, hearing about, the successes. We're going to have like a kind of rapid fire series of announcements of federal workers who have, they'll be reporting on their organizing successes or any victories that we've had. This will be the year in review tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern. So that is a great way to do it. That will also just get you in our lists, and you can get plugged in. We've had a backlog all year. We finally are starting to staff up and expect to get ahead of that backlog. So, continue to bear with us if, you're waiting to kind of get into the organizing. But yeah, sign up there, sign up at federalunionists.net. If you don't want to go to tomorrow's event, but still want to get in our list, that's the standing place to do it. The broader public can fill out those forms as well. We're in a bit of a kind of internal assessment period, being it's the end of the year, it's the holiday period. We are also prepping for, and I expect anybody who is in our list is going to see a lot more activity in January because the CR only goes through January 30th. We do have to be in shutdown prep mode because if Chuck Schumer caves again, then, or if he doesn't cave, we're going to have a shutdown. Hopefully he doesn't cave. And maybe we can help him, have a spine and stand up to the Republicans and pick another fight with the Trump administration and hopefully not cave 43 days in. Just when it looked like they were actually building some political momentum against the administration, the Democrats caved. So we are kind of we're in shutdown prep mode. That'll be, what that means. And I'll just say, federal workers out there, start tightening your belts now. Save up. Make it easier to last into the shut. Everything workers do in preparation for regular strikes, right?
Right.
You're not going to be allowed to work. You're not going to be getting paid. Sounds like a strike, quacks like a strike. We should treat it like a strike. It's not a strike, so we can legally do it. It's a shutdown. It's a lockout. So if there is going to be another lockout, shutdown on January 30th, or maybe it's in the fall of 2026, there's going to be more lockouts and shutdowns. Federal workers have to start treating them like the way that the labor movement treats periods when you don't work and don't get paid. And the federal labor movement doesn't have a lot of history of standing up picket lines or of, building mutual aid or of, saving up personal accounts ahead of those periods. You should change your direct deposit to the Navy credit union or one of the other credit unions that will, give you 0% loans to help you sustain yourself. The whole labor movement could and should be in shutdown prep mode for the federal sectors themselves, and the allies should be thinking about what are the weekly pantries that we're holding to make sure federal workers are going. The whole labor movement should have the back of federal workers in the lead up to next shutdowns, whenever that is, February or later. We're not there yet. The fund is doing what we can to kind of get the pieces in place for that kind of preparation. So yeah, I think if you're a federal worker out there, obviously get involved in the fund, get active in your local. And if you're, from the broader community, obviously continuing to organize your own workplace is the most important thing you can do. And keep an eye out for the fund and for the federal labor unions. And let's link up every chance we can in the streets, have each other's back at each other's pickets, and then in the shutdown context, I think those are going to continue to be the most important political developments in the country, is those shutdowns. So when they happen, we have to have a plan and be a real effective fighting force within them.
My last question for you before we let you go is, I'm trying to talk to partners and allies in the community and in the labor movement across the country about what stories the Valley Labor Report should be keeping an eye on in the next year. And so what are some things that you think TVLR should be looking at and making sure that we're tracking, or what are ways that we can help federal workers?
Really appreciate the question. I think, you're already tracking. You brought up Paul and Palmer and Ellen. These stories of federal workers who are, whether intentionally and with planning like Paul and Palmer did, or by surprise but still answered the call like Ellen, making real sacrifice for themselves and their families to stand up for the public interest, for the programs that they provide as federal workers and critical federal agencies. I think continuing to tell their stories, having them on as guests. There was a debate very early on in 2025, in January, February, when it was becoming clear that this administration was going harder than anybody even feared. And the debate was, do we do our work publicly with our masks off, with our names published, or do we try to avoid the risks of retaliation by masking up, maybe using pseudonyms, etc. And the fun, it was so impressive to see a cohering around a position that was not obvious, that we have to be public. We have to put our faces out there, because otherwise the trauma, the fear has taken hold. We've already lost if we retreat into anonymity. And so anything you and the broader, kind of left labor, friends of the fight back can do to help broadcast and break through. Obviously, we take the appearances we can get in the mainstream media, but they're few and far between. It doesn't fit their narrative. Even the best liberals at, MSNBC, don't see the necessity of telling the story of the Paul and Palmers and Ellens every day. I mean, they do, and we use it when we can, but good friends in podcasts like yours, I think continuing to help us break through and tell our story and reach a broader audience and get, we need to make superstars out of Paul Asadebe and Ellen May and all these folks. They are the historical figures that are going to get us through this. They're the leaders that we need. So anything you can continue, there's going to be other names. We don't know who they are yet, but they're in their workplaces. They're fighting. They will face retaliation. And some of them will choose to be public and stand up and show their face and say their name and say, I'm not going to stand for this. Do what you have to me, but I'm not going to just take it. And the more people we have doing that, the better. And the more people like you we have helping them tell their stories, better still. So I would say just keep your eye on it. And I know you're in the mix, Jake. So keep telling our story, keep having our people on as they stand up and fight. Because ultimately we need every act of retaliation to blow back up on them. And that's ultimately our strategy, is make their overreach, make it consequential politically. And then we can retake the momentum and build a government that actually works for people.
Chris Dols is Executive Director of the Federal Unionists Network, current president of IFPTE Local 98 in New York. Chris, thank you for your time.
Thanks so much, Jacob. Always great to be with you, and can't wait to come back.
Yep, talk soon. We got some more to talk about, though, folks. 844-899-TVLR if you've got anything to add. 844-899-8857. There's a Tennessee employee who worked for, I think the clip says it, so I don't need to worry too much about it. I think it was for the Department of Commerce or something in Tennessee, who had some thoughts following the attempt to canonize Charlie Kirk as a secular and a not so secular saint, and she was subsequently fired for having those opinions from the state of Tennessee, and now FIRE, and I forget what FIRE stands for, but I'll look it up during the clip. FIRE is now representing her as they sue the state of Tennessee to try to get her job back. Let's play clip 1.
In the United States, you should be able to hold an opinion and a job. But I was fired for doing just that. I'm Monica Meeks. I served for over 20 years in the United States Army, and I'm a lifelong public servant. Now I'm being denied the very rights I fought for. When I'm off the clock, I like to debate politics with the battle buddies I served with. After the murder of Charlie Kirk this fall, I had a debate with a conservative battle buddy on Facebook. I told him I thought Charlie Kirk promoted white supremacy. Hey, you don't have to agree with me. He certainly didn't. But this is how debates are supposed to work in this country. Two people from different perspectives hashing it out. I was sharing my personal views, not speaking on behalf of my employer. But someone didn't like it. They took a screenshot of an exchange with my battle buddy and eventually tagged the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance's X account. A handful of people later commented on the department's X page and demanded that I get fired. Hours later, my phone rang. It was my supervisor. She told me to check my personal email. When I opened it, I found a termination letter from Commissioner Carter Lawrence waiting for me in my inbox. I was shocked. My Facebook profile doesn't even mention where I work, and it clearly says that all my opinions are my own. I had 9 years of spotless service, great reviews, and received bonuses for my work, all thrown away because a few people on the internet didn't like what I said. This sets a dangerous precedent. Even if you don't like my views, do you really want trolls deciding who the government can hire and fire over a single comment they disagree with? If that's the standard, none of the millions of public employees are safe in America, and no opinion is free. That's why I'm suing Commissioner Lawrence. I served my country to defend these very rights, not lose my jobs for exercising them. Today it's me, tomorrow it could be you.
And just for people who are listening audio only, her comment was on it was on a post that was, a part of the canonization ritual for Charlie Kirk. She said, "The way you tap dance for either for white supremacy or for a white supremacist should be studied. That was the comment that got her fired. And like she said, you don't have to agree with it. And the person that she was talking to also didn't agree with it. But she is correct that you should be able to, in the United States of America, have an opinion and a job. I mean, that is such a, I mean, just rhetorically speaking, I mean, let's step back from the politics and actually the substance of everything. That is a bar. I mean, that is a bar. That's incredible. You should be able to have an opinion and a job in this country. And so I really appreciate this organization for doing this. The organization is FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. And I have been so impressed with them because they've been a long time free speech sort of advocacy organization, and so for a while they were a little bit more conservative coded because I think they kind of fought against some of maybe at least what they perceived as some of the excesses of woke or whatever, and trying to, make sure that people can have even conservative opinions, even extreme conservative opinions in workplaces and, on college campuses and things like that. And so, but they are the only one of these organizations that I have seen that have been in the past more conservative coded, fighting for free speech, that have continued to fight for free speech when it means now they are being more liberal coded because they're fighting for a person's right to, not want to canonize as a saint Charlie Kirk, which I think everybody should have that right in this country. You should have a right to dispute whether or not Charlie Kirk is deserving of sainthood. I think that's fine. And I think you should even have the right to express that view in an extreme way. And you don't have to agree with it, but especially, if you're working for a government entity, you should be able to have an opinion that is different from the government. So I really appreciate and respect so much the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression for what they're doing here for this Tennessee employee. I hope they're successful, and I hope it sets a precedent. I don't know if you had anything else that you wanted to add, Adam, to that.
No, I'm good. I think it's so important that every employee, no matter who you work for, right? It really shouldn't matter who you work for. You should be able to have an opinion, and it doesn't matter if we like the opinion. Your opinion shouldn't take away your livelihood. And for better or worse, our system is most of us have to go work for somebody else to be able to feed our families and put a roof over our heads. And, our opinions or expression of those opinions shouldn't be a sacrifice of our livelihood.
Right.
So I agree with you. I think it's often a lot of hypocrisy around this free speech stuff. It's very political. So I'm not very familiar with the organization, but I agree. I think it's a worthy fight.
844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857. Last week, we did a video on Matt Walsh, who, as we said last week, has begun a journey of investigation about why things suck now. And so we critiqued that video. We had some thoughts about it. We thought his analysis was lacking, and particularly his recommendations for a solution. Among the things that he identified as reasons for things being bad now, female CEOs, workers, some first-line supervisors. Occasionally, he would blame, as I said, female CEOs, but never in a kind of systematic way. Just kind of the individual CEOs. He did point to Cisco being so big as potentially a problem, and I did not dispute that he said that it's a problem that Cisco is so big. But what we pointed out in our video is that his response to that problem was not we should break Cisco up. We should have a policy response to a societal problem. His response was just to, blame workers, blame consumers, and ultimately his final solution was consumers should just consume better. And that was his final response. And some people took issue with this. I pulled a couple of comments from our clip. Hydraulic Saint says, this video is incredibly dishonest about what Matt Walsh said. In Walsh's main video on the subject, he identifies the massive market share grabbing by mega distributors like Cisco and U.S. Foods and their tendency to consolidate entire food production industries into a few specific providers that are then distributed to hundreds of thousands of restaurants, being the core source of enshittification. And I mentioned that in the video. This person clearly did not watch the whole video or did not engage with it. But I mentioned that he said Cisco bad. I also mentioned that I also talked more about Cisco and identified more of the problems with Cisco. And talked about how his analysis of Cisco was actually largely cribbed from a More Perfect Union video. Okay? So I talked about that. My problem was with his other, identifications of other things as problems, which I don't actually think are the real problems, and his lack of a real solution. Back to the comment from Hydraulic Saint. All while both companies relentlessly cut costs and work their best to provide shelf-stable product over quality product. You really had to throw out a massive portion of the original video in order to boil it down to only blaming the workers. I didn't say he only blamed the workers. Again, you're not representing me correctly, Hydraulic Saint. I'm not going to dignify full viewership of your video with such a dishonest hook. And so, look, obviously did not watch the whole video, and it shows in the foolishness of the comment. And we got another one here from Delunk5906. Why do people clip and misrepresent people on the right so much? This video sucks. And so I saw these comments, and I was a little bit frustrated. I have to say I was hurt by the accusations of misrepresentation. And so I went back and I looked, and I feel very good, actually, about the way that we represented Matt Walsh. And so I wanted to play just two, because I don't want to do the whole segment again. We spent like 25 minutes on it. So I don't want to do the whole thing again. But I want to take the two big clips from his video and play them for you again, because these clips come from the beginning of the video and the end of the video. The first clip that I'm going to play for you sets the preface, right? He sets the preface by saying, I'm going to do this big investigation, but I assure you the problems are not private equity or capitalism, and that's, so don't be looking there. There must be some other problem, which he then ultimately says is consumers are just bad at being consumers. So let's just play again. This is how he opens the video. Clip 2.
Something is causing the quality of prepared food to decline in a very noticeable and frankly kind of disgusting fashion. So what is it? And this is a question that matters, and not just because it's annoying that every chain restaurant in the country serves inedible slop. It matters because most Americans have a general sense that the general quality of everything has declined across the board. And as quality declines, quality of life declines. So why is that happening? I mean, what is going on? And is it even true that it's actually happening, or are we all just being nostalgic for, do we have rose-colored glasses about the past? Well, it is true. And so we're going to focus just on the issue of restaurants here. The very first answer that you'll hear if you ask around on social media, well, they'll say, well, of course, capitalism is the culprit. Specifically, it's the private equity companies who are purchasing beloved brands and then slowly strip mining them to extract every last dollar of available profit until nothing is left. And therefore, we need to abolish the banks and all the investment companies and the concept of money itself and immediately adopt socialism. Because in socialist countries, they have really good food. They're known for that. That's kind of the consensus at this point. But there are a couple of problems with the consensus. First of all, the decline I'm talking about is a relatively recent phenomenon, but we've had capitalism in this country for a long time, as you may have noticed, and private equity is nothing new either.
So, there you go. I mean, it's whatever, that's fine, but it is what it is. And I'm not even saying that capitalism specifically is the problem, right? And he's correct that capitalism specifically is not the problem, because as he says, we've had capitalism for a lot of years, and we used to have better things. But that doesn't mean there is not a systemic problem or a unique problem with the financialization of capitalism and the rules that allow that to happen. And so, but that's how he starts the video, is, ruling out kind of broader problems and by implication, broader solutions. And this is how he ends the video, which I will say, as Hydraulic Saint mentions, he talks about Cisco bad. He says Cisco bad in his video. That's true. That's true. But he does not say that we should break Cisco up. He should not say that we should amend the rules under which these companies are operating such that they can no longer operate in that way. And that was my whole critique of the video, is that there was no real solution. And just to re-emphasize that for you, here is how Matt Walsh ends his video. This is his closing argument. After he has gone through all of these things about how, these specific private equity companies are doing something bad, Cisco is doing something bad, this is his solution, how he proposes to resolve the problem. Clip 3.
People who tolerate mediocrity are keeping these restaurants and private equity companies in business. They're paying the salaries of the CEO of Cracker Barrel, and they're making Cisco the largest distributor of food in the world. We're doing this for no discernible reason, by the way. I'm just as guilty. But I don't need a sandwich from Subway or from Jimmy John's. Most of that you could do that at home for a fraction of the price. You can make a lot of this food now, you can make at home and it will be better and cheaper. So we don't need to abolish capitalism to stop this long-standing, humiliating decay. We can adopt some standards. We can stop wasting our money in exchange for slop from Subway, which is owned by the same private equity company as about a dozen other brands. We could choose to withhold our money until we get quality in return. It's actually not anywhere near as difficult as it sounds. Yes, private equity companies and CEOs and big conglomerates, they want your money. But if you want restaurants to be worth the trip, and if you want your pizza to taste somewhat distinct from every other pizza, then for the foreseeable future, your only option is to withhold it.
So there you go. Just be a better consumer, again, is his that's his whole solution to the whole problem. Be a better consumer, be a better worker, just be better as an individual. No problems with the system, no problems with the rules that are set up, and so it's very silly. We did fortunately have a lot of other comments that were much more positive about our video, including Angus Matheson 8906, who says Matt Walsh fishes turds out of public toilets and gobbles them like hot dogs. So we have some discerning viewers out there. All right, we're coming up on the end of the second half of the program. I don't have anything else that I want to make sure that we get to. 844-899-TVLR if you want to call in before we wrap. On our last live show of the year, again, we will have shows on the 20th and the 27th. They will be pre-tapes. Got lots of good interviews lined up for you for those. But we will not be live during those days. So, Adam, do you have anything else that you wanted to make sure that we got to before we left off?
Yeah, I just wanted to remind folks that Labor Notes does have that online workshop coming up January 5th on running for union office. So I think that's really important. If you are thinking about it in any way, maybe even just for other folks, bookmark that, go to labornotes.org/events and check it out.
All right.
Otherwise, that's all I got. I just really appreciate all the support, y'all. So I hope everyone has a great holiday season. Please stay in touch with us. Leave us some voicemails over the break. We'd love it.
Yeah, absolutely. 844-899-TVLR. TWY87 asks if that is a one-piece shirt that I am wearing. And indeed it is. It's got a lot more happening on the back. I don't know if you could see that, but yeah, he says impeccable taste, one of my favorite manga series. Yeah, I like it. I'm an anime only viewer, but I do watch it very regularly. So you should watch One Piece too. It's a good show. All right, folks, that's it for the Valley Labor Report, the last live show of 2025. Thank you all so much for tuning in every week, and we will see you in 2026. Solidarity forever.